Thank you. Before you sit down, we're just going to have a word of prayer from Olivia Mwaniki.
Let's bow down our heads and pray. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning with thanksgiving in our hearts. Lord, we dedicate this day before thy presence. I pray that you will guide us and lead us through this day and protect us, O Lord. We pray this, trusting and believing in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. We can take our seats. Our guests, our hosts first, representative of the VC, DVC Professor Julius. We have our KSA Board of Directors present. We have our partners in the public sector and private sector, academia, and all our friends who are here, people of the media. We welcome you to this event. And to begin us off, we're going to start with a very brief documentary just to show us what work has been put into and how we've come to this moment that we are launching Taifa 1 satellite. So, technical.
The Kenya Space Agency is set to launch its second nano-satellite christened Taifa 1 in April this year in California, United States of America. Taifa 1 satellite is an Earth observation satellite with a payload designed to provide multispectral imagery of Kenya that will be useful for environmental monitoring, natural resources management, agriculture, disaster risk mitigation and security, among others. The satellite will be a game changer in enhancing Kenya's access to real-time data that is crucial in socio-economic development spheres such as urban planning, agriculture, reforestation, climate change, telemedicine, among others. Obtaining reliable and cost-effective data is critical in addressing societal changes effectively. Therefore, satellite data can be used by the government to improve its ways of predicting calamities, detecting security threats, managing natural resources, and regulating urbanization.
For satellite communications, or generally having data from an asset in space, you need to have a ground receiver station that you will use to download the data or will be in communication with the satellite. It will be tracking that satellite so that every time it is overhead Kenya, remember this is a satellite that is going around the Earth, and every time it is overhead Kenya, that is the time our ground receiver station is going to download, is going to establish a link with the satellite and download the data. These are imagery data. So as now to see how that is connected to the farmer. So if, for example, you use that satellite imagery to characterize the condition of crops, for example, you are able to say that this is land that is under maize. And because that satellite will be going over Kenya every time, so there will be a series
too much resources from those critical areas like health, food security, water management, because big satellites would cost a lot of money. So now
of space data, but also an active player in the quest to strengthen the space agenda. In the development of Taifa 1 nanosatellite, a team of Kenyan engineers, both electrical and mechanical, were identified to implement the project. They underwent a customized training on the space environment, orbital mechanics, and design of space systems to be able to understand and design a mission that would survive the extreme space environment.
The Human Resource Department in the Kenya Space Agency sourced and engaged electrical engineers, mechanical engineers who were trained to develop the Taifa 1 satellite.
We have had a long journey coming up to this point, and I'm also happy to present that apart from this development, we have also been able to do additional hardware. This board that I have with me here today is the Sayari Labs payload processor, which we designed internally fully at this facility, and is currently has gone to space. So it is a radio module that we believe that once successfully tested in space will be able to support our future missions.
In my role as a team lead, I was responsible in coordinating between our team that is developing the subsystems here in Kenya and also our partners outside. In the coordination, we were doing a lot of communication as well as ensuring that all the subsystems are on the same page. Another component is that we were doing reports where we were able to document all the subsystems to make sure that everything is well documented and can be followed by any team member within the team.
Taifa 1 is a 3U satellite. When you talk about 3U, we say it is in a class of nanosatellites. We have other satellites which are bigger, but for this case it is a nanosatellite, and its dimensions are 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 30 centimeter. So when we talk about the structures, we are talking about the frame that houses all other subsystems of the satellite. The structure is something like this. So it houses all other subsystems, and the other subsystems include the onboard computer, the communication subsystem, the electric power subsystem. There is the attitude determination and control subsystem, and then there is the payload.
After the launch, our role as electrical engineers will be to operate the satellite and also to monitor the performance of the satellite, making sure that every parameter that was set and every functionality that the satellite is supposed to perform performs well, and also monitoring the health checks of the satellite.
So what I'm in charge of with the Taifa 1 mission is the ground receiving station and applications. What generally happens at the ground applications and receiving station is where we receive the commands or the requests from the stakeholders, the type of data they want, the type of location where they want, and that is where the mission's operations also take place.
The space sector has a wide array of stakeholders. There is government, who are key stakeholders, because essentially most of the applications, we are not usually the end users. We develop systems which are supposed to inform decisions in other regions.
Increasingly, government are making decisions based on data on various issues. The best platform and instrument to collect data is satellite. Data on agriculture, data on minerals, data on energy, data on our forest cover, data on urbanization. So the best instrument to capture data now, in the age we are in, is satellite.
For Earth observation alone, I can say there's virtually a host of users who utilize data from Earth observation.
Here at ECPAC, one of the things that we are doing specifically in the Eager Disaster Operations Center is building early warning applications, which we believe will be able to help our member states act early before the disaster hits. One of the key components of early warning systems is Earth observation data, and that is where Kenya Space Agency comes in. We use a lot of Earth observation data from different satellites at the moment to be able to build applications that can be used to inform decisions and policies as well. We are really looking forward to integrating the data from Taifa 1 into the systems that we're developing here at ECPAC.
Locate IT, or what sometimes people refer to as Locate It, is a geo-ICT company based here in Nairobi, Kenya. So Locate It and Kenya Space Agency have been partnering over the last couple of years on very specifically a project we call Africultures, which is use of remote sensing technologies to enhance agricultural productivity in Africa. And this presents an opportunity for us to continue developing applications that will serve and address our societal needs.
My name is Kenneth Chepkwony. I'm a program manager at Tomorrow Now, which is a non-profit that works to bridge the gap between next generation weather and climate solutions and communities that need them most. We do this by leveraging philanthropic capital as well as innovative partnerships with organizations including Kenya Space Agency, who've been a key stakeholder that we've been keen to work with. So Tomorrow Now is currently working on an MOU with the Kenya Space Agency, and the idea will be to leverage some of the quality data that the Kenya Space Agency is looking to generate and what they already have.
Yes, so Akiba Mashinani Trust supports a group of people living in informal settlements known as Muungano wa Vijiji, who have come together to advocate for the rights of the people that are living in the informal settlements. So the launch of this new satellite, I believe it's going to make the work that Akiba Mashinani Trust does more easier, in that we'll be able to get a clearer imagery. So what we do in most cases is that we get images from satellite imageries, we digitize them to come up with shapefiles. And one of the challenges that we get is that some of these images are not very clear. So we are hoping that these images from this new satellite are going to be clearer, and that will make our mapping exercise very simple.
The DRSS stands for Directorate of Resource Survey and Remote Sensing. The relationship between the DRSS and the Kenya Space Agency has been there for quite a long time, since the inception. And this is due to the fact that actually both institutions are applying remote sensing technology in implementation of their core mandate. So there's the issue of application of satellite data in undertaking most of the programs that address socio-economic issues in Kenya. So these two institutions have been in collaboration for quite a long time. In fact, we also have a memorandum of understanding between the two institutions that affirms the strong relationship between these two agencies.
Kenya's historic launch of the Taifa 1 nanosatellite will be incomplete without a brief look into history. Kenya's forays into space dates back to 1964, when the San Marco Equatorial Range, now known as the Luigi Broglio Malindi Space Center, was established. As a result of the strides, the first satellite, San Marco 2, was launched into orbit from the Malindi-based station on 26 April 1967. Thereafter, the Kenyan space industry has grown in leaps and bounds, totaling 9 satellites and 15 sounding rockets launched in a span of 2 decades from 1967 and 1988 from Malindi, Kenya.
Space technology is critical. It's critical for the military, it's critical for government in improving the socio-economic aspects of its people. Kenya is on the equator, and Kenya being in the equator, then it is a very, very important position globally to collect data from the space.
To manage all space-related activities in the country, the National Space Secretariat was established in 2009, which later transitioned into the Kenya Space Agency in 2017, following the approval of the Kenya Space Policy, the Kenya Space Strategy, and the Kenya Space Agency Executive Order by Cabinet in the year 2016.
The Kenya Space Agency is a premier space organization that was created by the government of Kenya to facilitate the development of space programs in Kenya.
The Kenya Space Agency has shown beyond reasonable doubt that it is growing over a period of time. And today I'm happy to report that I think Kenya Space Agency has the potential, has the capacity to be a leader in Africa and in the global world.
In international space law, just as we have maritime and air law, in national space law there are treaties or rules that govern how state actors and non-state actors operate or conduct activities in space. So for Kenya, the agency is the one that controls how entities can conduct their activities in space. This is because each object or each act of a citizen or an entity is the responsibility of the country or the government in that matter.
What we have started with now is mostly capacity building, training and research. And we have a collaborative means of doing this with our institutions of higher learning, where we give them grants and then they develop products that are related to space programs. On the other hand, we also have an outreach program where we reach out to primary schools and secondary schools to be able to create an interest in space matters so that our children can have some motivation, some interest in science subjects, in geography, in technology subjects, in mathematics, in science, so that in future we have a pool of scientists and engineers that are able to deal with matter space, because this is a new frontier for all countries and we don't want to be left behind.
Moving up the ladder, Kenya launched its first satellite in March 2018. The 1U nanosatellite, named the first Kenyan University nanosatellite precursor flight, was developed by the University of Nairobi with technical assistance from Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency under the auspices of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs Access to Space for All initiative. The 2018 satellite mission served as a crucial springboard in Kenya's quest to not only venture into space, but also make use of vital data thereof. It also demonstrated great potential of the Kenyan people in design and development of space systems.
And for the young children, the young kids, those in primary school, those in secondary school, the young people, they are those who see and talk about space because they see it on TV. Now it's no longer on TV in Western world countries. Now the launch of space of satellite is now in Kenya.
The launch of Taifa 1 nanosatellite by the Kenya Space Agency is without doubt a game changer, a timely intervention to bring the future to the present.
Thank you very much. Hata makofi jamini. I'm hoping that was informative. I would like to request that we all move forward so that the latecomers can sneak to the back. Can we please take 1 minute to occupy the seats at the front, please? 1 minute. DJ, we can have a motivation song to move people faster. Once again, my name is Neema Mutemi. I'm one of your moderators today. As soon as we are settled, we will invite the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Academic Affairs, University of Nairobi, to give us the welcome remarks from the university on behalf of the Vice Chancellor. Okay. DJ, we are waiting for you so that the DVC can make his way to the front. Professor, thank you very much.
I can proceed.
Welcome, you can proceed.
Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good morning. My name is Julius Ogengo. I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Affairs. I have been requested by the Vice Chancellor that I represent him this morning. He has traveled. And so, permit me to read his remarks directly. The Vice Chancellor is Professor Stephen Kiama. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today in this great hall to mark with you this auspicious event, the launch of the Taifa 1 3U nanosatellite. It's a special moment, also being celebrated from an institution that is proud to belong to the group of institutions that has contributed to the great skills and capabilities that have today been demonstrated by engineers at the Kenya Space Agency. We are proud to be associated with these young Kenyans who are breaking barriers and achieving on behalf of our country feats that have traditionally been a reserve of the developed world. As an academician in our country, this has greatly elated me. Space technology, by requiring such high standards in scientific research and in engineering design and development, has in most nations been the driver of development in other forms of domestically produced technology and the economy at large. This speaks to the significance of today's celebrations. Regionally, Kenya has been active in outer space affairs for decades, since the establishment of the San Marco Equatorial Range in 1964, and has over the past few years moved forward significantly in the development of its own homegrown space technology. In 2018, we launched our first satellite into space, a 1U nanosatellite, which was dubbed the first Kenyan University nanosatellite precursor flight, ICUNS PF. This satellite was built by researchers from this university in collaboration with Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, and it provided hands-on experience for our local engineers and planted a seed of greater possibilities for our space industry. Similar efforts have continued in our country with an even greater intensity, leading to the milestones that we are marking today. While the Taifa 1 satellite is set to carve its place in the history of our country in many years, the fact that it does so within an environment that's rapidly taking off and growing with this kind of momentum is an indicator that we are bound to achieve and benefit more from these kinds of foundations that we are laying. Here at the university, we are proud of this achievement and are eager to interact with the data that is set to yield. We believe that this technology is fully capable of turning around key areas of our economy, such as agriculture, for the better. As such, our researchers are ready to help our country make the most sense so that it can find the best use in the various sectors of our economy, and to do so even as we hope to have more of similar and more enhanced missions in the future. As a leading university in the region, we are committed to promoting sustainable development and addressing the challenges facing our country and the world, and the launch of Taifa 1 satellite aligns perfectly with our goals and will help us to make significant strides in these areas. While Taifa 1 is equipped with a camera as its instrument, the local capacity we have built in space systems engineering through it puts us in a position where we can unlock other critical areas of space applications, such as communication, navigation, and even scientific missions beyond the Earth through future missions. These are all important research areas in which the university would like to take part from the front seat and to lead the region and the world. Space technology allows us to understand our environment better, and this unlocks our ability to adapt better to the same environment, which is the essence of survival. In the area of agriculture and food security, our faculty and students will be able to use the images provided by the satellite to monitor soil moisture, crop health, and weather conditions more accurately. This will enable us to make more informed decisions about when and how to plant and harvest crops, ensuring that our farmers have the resources and information they need to produce crops and livestock more efficiently and sustainably. Apart from research opportunities based on space data that will result from these missions, we are already proud of partners of the Kenya Space Agency. We have taken part in research grants in which our students have built models of nanosatellites for capacity building purposes. Through such opportunities, our students have actively interacted with the experts from the Space Agency, leading to a much improved awareness among our upcoming scientists and engineers on the significance of space science and technology and the opportunities it's capable of unlocking for them in future. But perhaps most importantly, the launch of our Earth observation satellite represents a symbol of our country's commitment to progress and development. As a university, we are proud to be at the forefront of this effort, educating the next generation of leaders who will be responsible for driving our country forward. In closing, I would like to express my gratitude to our government for making all this possible and for the efforts it's making in fostering education and technology in our country. I would like to thank the agency for being diligent, as we can see, in developing the space sector in Kenya, and in particular the teams that have worked and continue to work tirelessly to make this project a success. I am confident that this achievement, along with similar strides that our country is undertaking, will inspire our faculty, students, and the nation at large to continue to dream big and work hard to achieve their own goals and aspirations. I am glad to say that we are now witnessing a more resilient, sustainable, and prosperous future for our country in the offing. Thank you very much and welcome. God bless you.
Another round of applause for Professor Julius Ogengo. Thank you, sir, for your kind remarks, and thank you for your continued partnership with the agency and the space sector at large. So at this juncture, after the introduction that you've had, we're going to unpack a few of the issues that you've seen regarding the satellite building and all that. And today we're going to have two panel discussions just to discuss about the issues on space technology. And the first one is going to be on space education and research. And then after that, we'll have one on application of space technology for socio-economic development in Kenya. So the first panelists up front, I'm going to have first Professor Paul Baki from the Technical University of Kenya. Kindly, sir, if you'd just take your seat up front. And then he will be followed quickly by Dr. Cosmas Kariuki of University of Nairobi. Engineer Patan Odhiambo, make your way up front as well. I'm sure now with that documentary, of course, there are a few familiar faces in the room. These are not stories. These are something that has really happened in Kenya, so it should be some sort of inspiration. Patan, okay. The next one I'm going to have is Vanessa Inziani. There's another stairs the other side. Welcome to the stage. And kindly prepare your questions on space research and education. Technical team, you can help us with the microphones. Mic check. Mic check. Mic check. All right. So for these first panel discussions, I'll be your moderator. My name is Jack Matara. I am the Acting Deputy Director, Space Research and Innovation at the Kenya Space Agency. And I'll give my panelists 1 minute to introduce yourself and what you do in the space ecosystem or the space sector. We'll start with Dr. Cosmas.
Okay, thank you, Matara. My name is Mutugi Kiruki Cosmas, and I'm from the Department of Electrical and Information Engineering at the University of Nairobi. My involvement in space is through some projects that the Kenya Space Agency has given us grants to pursue, and that is on some satellite development as the University of Nairobi, and also as some consortium of universities in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another satellite is on the way to being launched. Dr. Cosmas Kariuki is overseeing the development of Tafiti, which is a satellite being done by university students, a consortium of 4 universities, Nairobi University, JKUAT, Technical University, and Kenyatta University. So that one will also be going up very, very soon. Watch this space. Professor Baki.
Thank you very much. Professor Paul Baki. I'm from the Technical University of Kenya. I'm also the Honorary Secretary, Kenya National Academy of Sciences. My journey in the area began right here at the University of Nairobi, where I created a program in astronomy and astrophysics. Back in 2009 is when we launched that program. It was then a flagship project of the university, as it were. And then I nurtured that to maturity, and then went on into the area of space weather, study of the space environment where we send these satellites, and so on. And I am a consultant in the area of space. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Professor. You're wondering where that is coming from. So we have 4 main thematic areas in space technology. What we are having today with our satellite Taifa 1 is Earth observation. We also have space science and astronomy, where we also do space weather monitoring. That is the niche of Professor Baki. We also have satellite communications and position, navigation, and timing. So we are just starting. Earth observation is the first one. We'll of course be exploring the rest of the thematic areas. Patan?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure having and seeing all of you here today. I am Patan Odhiambo, an electrical and electronics engineer, graduate from Jomo Kenyatta University. I have worked on the Taifa 1 mission as the lead communication subsystem engineer. That means that I took part in the design of the communication link, the wireless link we have between us and the satellite, how we send the telemetry, and how we receive the telemetry, how we send the telecommands to the satellite, and how we download the images from the satellite. I also was the lead payload engineer, so the selection of the camera that we have on Taifa 1, which is the heart of the mission, to help us get images over the Kenyan territory. It's a pleasure being here, and I look forward to having great discussions.
Thank you, Patan. Vanessa?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Vanessa Inziani. I'm head of programs for Young Scientists Kenya. I am going to assume, other than being the only lady in the panel and representing the women, my aim is also to represent the youth, especially in space education. And ideally what Young Scientists Kenya does is our main mission actually is just to inspire and empower a generation of young innovators, scientists, and entrepreneurs to be able to transform their communities using STEM. I assume you know what STEM is. Yes? Yes? We're in a class now. So yes? Thank you.
You at the back, what is STEM in full? See, they're hiding. They don't know STEM. You'll unpack that one later. All right. So we'll go straight into it. I'm saying that, as we just discuss, just get ready your questions, and at any time you'll be free to interrupt and, ask whatever, so that we can be able to unpack this satellite technology properly. So let's just get straight into it. And Vanessa, before that Mike's cool off, I'd want you to respond to, how fundamental is STEM, especially when it comes to developing the national space capability, or just, transitioning into space disciplines.
Yeah, so I think STEM, I don't know if the person at the back knows what STEM is, but that's science, technology, engineering, and maths. So for STEM and space education, they actually come together pretty well. And how I'd put that is that space is more about cognitive innovation and taking risks. So for example, if you were to go to the moon, why would you want to go to the moon? The first person who went there, what was in their mind? What did they think about it? For high school students currently, I think they mostly struggle with STEM, because STEM is normally taken as it's hard, it's difficult. That's around the maths, physics, bio, and chem. So I don't know the students in the room, if there are any students, what subjects you found particularly difficult, and what courses you're currently doing. So for space education and just space in general, we believe that STEM is a great impact, in that you can now be able to have STEM integrated with coming up with the solutions for problems right now, and it also integrates other subjects in STEM. So we can take astrobiology, for example. It questions the origin of life. It questions extraterrestrial beings. I'm sure most of you have watched movies with aliens, or movies with, just creatures that you're not too sure if they exist anymore. So space education, as you spark that interest, especially with science fiction, you're able to now see how space education gets into it, and STEM. So for astrobiology, technology, we have bio in it, we have AI, which is artificial intelligence, we have computer science, we also have I think chemistry and some maths. So STEM is all round. Some people feel STEM is only for those specific subjects. Some people also assume STEM is only engineering. I think we have 2 engineers up here, but STEM is a bit broad compared to what everyone assumes of it. So I think with Young Scientists Kenya, what we try to do is, I think as the chairman said in the video that was played earlier, we're trying to see how we can get young people to understand what some of these careers are, what some of the courses you're studying in space education are, and how you can be able to have more access to some of this information for you now to be able to join this growing field.
Thank you very much. Vanessa goes around the country with his team, also with the Kenya Space Agency and other partners to just, do the STEM education and outreach to just inspire our young learners to, of course, take up more of, STEM subjects and also transition into engineering courses when they get to university. Thank you, Vanessa, for that. So, Professor Baki, what would you say is the state of space research in Kenya in terms of, how we doing our innovation and development in the ecosystem? What is the state of space research? Where are we? What kind of capacity do we have?
Thank you very much, moderator. But let me give you a bit of history where we have come from. I think way back in 2003, we decided that we were going to develop a basic space science program at the University of Nairobi here. And that process took us a number of years until 2009 when we were able to have pushed it through the Senate. It was approved and then we launched it. But just around the same time in 2003, there was an international project which came about and roped in Kenya. This is what we call the Square Kilometer Array. It's a radio telescope with a collecting surface area of 1 kilometer squared. Obviously, that is the largest telescope. And so Kenya, alongside South Africa and 7 other countries, got into partnership to bid for that project. Eventually, this project was split between Africa and Australia. And so Kenya is one of those countries that will host part of that telescope. And that project had a human capital development program through which we sent many of our students, mostly from the University of Nairobi here, onto a program called the National Astrophysics and Space Science Program in South Africa. They went on to do their masters and eventually their PhDs. So far, that project has trained over 40 Kenyans, quite a number of them with PhDs. Many of them suffered brain drain. They never came back, to my disappointment, of course, because they were saying they were coming back to nothing because there's no infrastructure in the country which will enable them to do research. That program is still on. This is astronomy and astrophysics. I'll come to another one, the other one too. Then along the way, a university in the UK, let me say a consortium of them, came up with a program also to support the SK initiative. This is called Developing Africa with Radio Astronomy. This project has been running since 2015, and so far, normally the training takes place at the Technical University of Kenya. We train radio astronomers. So far, we have trained over 50. 30% of them have gone on to do their masters and PhDs. Some of them have come back. Others decided to stay where they went. Because, again, the issue of coming back to nothing arises. I would say, in a nutshell, we probably have about 20 or so PhDs in astronomy and astrophysics. Some of them have been absorbed back in our universities. I think the rest are still abroad, looking forward to something that will attract them back home. And I must say that those are the two major ones that are currently supporting human capital development in the area of basic space science, astronomy and astrophysics. In the area of space weather, which I alluded to, space weather is very different from the terrestrial weather, which meteorologists do here at the Gureti, and they will give you the weather forecast every evening, telling you how it will rain and so on. This other one is different. We study the space environment where we are going to send our satellite in order to understand how it will impact that system, in order to understand how eventually what the sun does affects even technologies on the ground. Because the sun does sometimes flare up, erupt like a volcano. When that happens, we are in trouble. Because our satellites could get damaged, electronics on board could get damaged, and it happened to South African satellite in 2011. It was home built, they sent it into space, and a space weather event occurred, and that was it. So we need to understand the environment in which we are sending these things. That we do. And then, of course, those effects cascade down to the surface of the Earth. They will also affect passengers who are flying, especially on polar routes. That is space weather. With lots of high radiation, they can disable high-frequency communication systems of aircrafts, as well as of other systems, even the military, so to speak. The same things, the same space weather events which do those things will come down to affect the power grid. Sometimes you see lots of power blackouts here, and it has nothing to do with sabotage by the power distributor. It is space weather. It will also affect our oil pipelines. Cause a lot of corrosion there, degrade even the flow meters, and sometimes our engineers would not know what the problem is. So what we have been doing, in fact, trying to land aircrafts, because these days we also use the GPS to land the aircrafts. When you rely on systems like that, you need to be sure that the accuracy is sufficient to enable safety be guaranteed. But sometimes when the sun does what it does in space, even that is compromised. And you can get loss of errors. While you think you are going to land an aircraft and you are still 100 meters above the ground, you are actually 20. And that can be disastrous. That is what we do in space physics, what we call space weather as well.
Thank you,
but
Professor.
Just in terms of human capital development, we started with infrastructure development sometime in 2008. Most of them were here at the University of Nairobi. Later on, we took some to JKUAT, Maseno, TUK, and now Pwani University.
Thank you, Professor.
That is growing fairly slowly. We have produced about 5 PhDs locally, and I think 6 masters. That is where we are. So we still don't have the critical mass to be able to get us to where we want to be. Thank you. I've taken too much time.
Thank you. Yes, please. Thank you for those insights on space weather and space science and astronomy. Now we know the difference between terrestrial weather and space weather and how they affect our systems down here. Dr. Cosmas, what has been your experience guiding students, in the development of Tafiti, which of course is a huge space research and innovation project?
Okay, thank you, Matara. Maybe to answer that question, I will give a background on how I came into that particular position. And this will show the importance of capacity building and what KSA is pursuing. During the ICUNS satellite that was launched in 2018, I was a master's student here at UON, and I participated in that project, especially in setting some ground station at the department. But through that project, I was in a position to get a scholarship for a PhD in Japan. And that scholarship was via the UNOSA, that the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. And the university that they have partnered with, that is the Kyushu Institute of Technology in Japan, is the leading university in terms of satellite development and capacity building in the space field. So I did my PhD there. And the greatest opportunity there was to have the hands-on in terms of satellite development. And you will also notice that quite a number of African governments have engaged the same institution in pursuit of their first satellites. And this includes our neighbor, Uganda. We also have Zimbabwe, we have Ghana, we also have Nigeria. These are governments that have partnered with that particular institution to build their first satellites. So from that experience, because you have the hands-on experience, then you are well equipped when you go back to your country to actually play a leading role in guiding those kind of projects. So I joined the University of Nairobi in 2021, so I'm still very new at the university. But thanks to Kenya Space Agency and in their wisdom, they saw it fit to engage universities in capacity building as far as satellite engineering is concerned. And we benefited from their first grant on a nanosatellite. That was in the year 2020, 2021. And from that project, the grant money was 1 million. To some people, that may sound low or small, but the impact it has at the university, especially to our students, is very huge, because in this kind of projects, we have a multidisciplinary team. You have students from electrical engineering, you have students from geospatial engineering, from mechanical engineering, coming together to build a system. And therefore, they are able to put the theoretical aspects as well as the practical aspects they learn in class into actually building a system. And I'm very glad, because I've seen one of my students from that particular first project, part of the Sayari labs that developed this Taifa 1. I think that is Alvin. I don't know. Alvin.
Amen.
Alvin is, yes, he is here, and he's a first-class holder from electrical engineering. So this is a real, this is a real impact that we are seeing from your initiative. The other second project, after completion of the 1U nanosatellite, and this is just a bench model to train students on how to approach some of these projects. The Kenya Space Agency also sponsored a 3U engineering model, and this now is being carried out by a consortium of 4 universities, as you mentioned, and the University of Nairobi is taking a leading role in that under the guidance of Professor Mwangi Mbudia, who is also my mentor, because he was also the PI for the ICUNS satellite. So in short, my experience, the 2 years that I've had here, that if we can have this kind of grants, however small some people might think they are, not just from the Kenya Space Agency, from other agencies, they go a long way into enhancing the skills of our students. Because at this time and age, what we need to be producing out there are students that are well equipped. From an engineering perspective, they are well equipped with the skills that they can participate in these cutting edge projects, not only in Kenya, but anywhere else in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cosmas, for that. It's very inspiring and encouraging, together with what Professor Baki has talked about. The Space Agency is here to make sure that, the space industry thrives and those opportunities are there. And we will definitely, as we work together in partnership with our stakeholders and academia, absorb all those academic giants that have had the advanced studies outside. And now, Patan, you're one from the industry. Of course, what would you say, what would you encourage students sitting here? What are some of the opportunities that we have in the space sector for, the students that are sitting here right now?
Yeah, so traditionally, we haven't been doing a lot of the actual engineering, especially when I would talk about electrical and electronics engineering, for example. Most of the time, our students leave college and they don't know what to do with what they learned in school. So most likely, they're likely to cycle back up and come into the teaching profession, or they're likely to go into other fields. So this has been a waste of the kind of skills we try to impart in the universities. But like the keynote speech today said, most nations, we have technology being spearheaded by space technology. Things such as GPS, we have a lot of scientific investigations that go on at the International Space Station. And these things do trickle down and they affect every other part of technology that we use in our daily lives. So when we can see Kenya making all this progress in space technology, it's a very positive news to our universities and to the students, and I'm very pleased that they are here today. You've heard Dr. Kiruki talking about my colleague Alvin. This is someone who graduated just last year, and together with all the other colleagues that we have, they are doing tremendous things. So we are at a point where our country is very ready to absorb the kind of skills that students learn in school. If I could mention my experience, when I joined Sayari Labs, I have had to push myself a lot. I have had to go back to everything I read in school because everything was required of me to apply at Sayari Labs. To be able to come up with the radio systems, to be able to do the mission design and analysis and all that, you only have room to apply the best of the knowledge you've acquired and only to get more. So my first encouragement to the students is that everything that you are learning in class, I would say this specifically for engineering, and I know, of course, we have other disciplines such as physics, like Professor Baki has mentioned, where we study space environment. Everything we do in class right now is going to be very useful in our country because we are beginning to do things that we have never done before, and we are beginning to do things that are going to trickle down. They are going to affect our economy massively. They're going to affect our families massively. My first encouragement to you is, if you didn't know why you are doing it, know that right now there is a reason, and that is why we are here to building satellites. We are building space technology, and as you will learn soon, the Kenya Space Agency has interests in even building more than just satellites alone. And like you've also heard from the panelists here, this is a multidisciplinary area. Everything is needed here. Even biology is needed here. So this brings a lot of relevance that we probably didn't see before in our university education to the fore. And it's an encouragement to the students to really try and act passionately in class because there is room for the skills that you are acquiring. We have also been able to participate in a lot of training activities for these students, which shows that there is external support that is pouring into the universities to help you to at least be able to relate. Sometimes you may find the class to be too theoretical. It doesn't have a direct application or connection to where you want to be in the future. But because of the kind of engagements that we keep having with you, it is clear to see that there is a lot of relevance in what you are doing, and we are also coming in to amplify this relevance.
Thank you, Patan. Thank you, Patan, for those nuggets of wisdom. Just to stick on you a little bit, so what have been the challenges that you've encountered in the development of this Taifa 1 mission? Just a few challenges in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, so like I said, there has been a bit of a learning curve, but we were able to take that as it came, and we handled it very well. Right now, we are quite advanced in the capabilities that we have. Then the second challenge that we experienced with the Taifa 1 is a chip shortage. At that time, we didn't have a good stock of the kind of electronic components we would need to build the satellite, and this is a challenge that we experienced and our partners also experienced. This delayed the mission by a couple of months. The next challenge that we faced, which is probably the biggest one, is the lack of the facilities that we would need. Like Professor Baki mentioned, working for space is not easy. There's a lot of challenge, and you need to work in a very well-controlled environment, very well-controlled procedures, and we don't have this locally. We have very few of these facilities even on the continent. So this pushes us to go out there and look for partners internationally, and this usually pushes up the cost of the project. It also pushes up the timelines of the project. So in brief, those are some of the challenges we have experienced.
Thank you very much. You've heard from, the man himself, the engineer. So are there any questions from the audience? If there's any burning question, any clarification, or you just listeners? I wanted to, all right. We have one at the back, then we come to the front. Is there a roving mic, technical? Do we have a roving mic? Try to be brief and to the point.
Oh, it's fine. Hi, my name is John Mark, space enthusiast. My question is, since 2018, with the OneCoon's deployment from the International Space Station, have there been any challenges of satellite communications and data transmission that you have noticed? And what are some of the ways that you're addressing these challenges? And could the revamping of the Longonot satellite station help in addressing such challenges?
Very precise question. Who's that particularly directed to?
All of the panelists, but most importantly, the ones from Sayari Labs and Professor Baki.
All right. Professor Baki, you've been notified.
Well, I suppose you are alluding to the icons that was launched in 2018. I'm not aware that it was a functional satellite that transmits data, unless KSA, Kenya Space Agency, wants to state to the contrary. I thought it was a technology demonstration project. As to whether it was capturing data and sending back to us, I'm not sure. So therefore, from my own perspective, I don't think there would be challenges or any lessons learned if there was no data being transmitted. But if the answer is yes, then perhaps Kenya Space Agency can tell us.
We have a professor here, Professor Charles Mwangi, one of the engineers of Icons, is just seated on the front row. Kindly give him the mic.
Thank you, Jack. Based on the question, there was no challenge. The data was received for the 2 years that the CubeSat was in space. So we were able to receive the imagery. Again, it was a much, like Professor Baki indicated, it was more of a technology demonstration. The CubeSat was tumbling in space, so depending on what side it was facing when taking the imagery, then we would receive that imagery. So some of the imagery were facing towards the sun, the space, and the other ones on the ground. So, but you were able to receive that. On the question on whether we would use Longonot Earth Station to receive that, the frequencies are different, so you require different antennas to receive that. But again, like Professor Baki indicated, part of the reasoning behind the Longonot Earth Station was to convert it to be used for SKA. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Longonot Earth Station is being prepped for using SKA. We had another one here.
Thank you very much. I'm Professor Gordon Wayumba from Technical University of Kenya. What I can say is that the satellite was already being launched in space. I think what the Kenya Space Agency now needs to do is to set up a system for analyzing the data when we get the data down here. It's not a mean task because the satellite will be providing data from July this year, and we need a team of experts that will be handling this data because, as Professor Baki said, it goes through the atmosphere and we get a lot of effects on the data that is coming down. We need to handle the data very carefully. We also need to develop a system of cleaning this data so that it is usable to the common people on the ground in various fields. The Kenya Space Agency has moved in this area because this is the first stage in launching the satellite. Design and launching the first stage. The second stage is processing the data. The third stage is how usable on the ground. And I think that is a multidisciplinary coming from various areas, particularly geospatial engineering, which deals with the digital image processing and the applications to various areas. I'm not sure how far Kenya Space Agency has dealt with this issue, and I think that's our next problem. Because if we are not prepared, the satellite will start giving us data. It will just bring data every day coming down. And we are not going to go to other people from overseas to help us deal with this data. We need to develop our own skills and our own capacities. And I think we have enough technical universities to deal with this matter. And I think we need to think very carefully. Otherwise, the satellite will be up there, running around, picking data. And the question is, how do you process this data for the community to use it? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Oyumba, for your concerns. Myself, I'm a geospatial engineer, and I would like to assure you that the Kenya Space Agency and the stakeholders are on top of things when it comes to this. We're not going to have to launch the satellite and leave it at that particular time. We're also looking at the data management, processing, analysis, and even using advanced tools, AI, machine learning, and analytics, just to be able to get proper information that will be used for, or more intelligence to be used for decision making. So that one is ongoing. You have there's a ground station already in place, and some of the modalities also being put in place, and also capacity development in analytics. Thank you. Let's have one last one. Wow. Okay, a quick one from Hezron.
Good morning. My name is Hezron Sea. I'm a geospatial engineer working for the Water Resources Authority. Now, my question is, we have talked about the cake, we have talked about how it's going to be baked, but we are not talking about when we are going to eat it and whether it's free or not. So I want to know how soon is this data going to be available? To whom is it going to be available? Is there like a platform where we'll be downloading this data? What are the pricing plans? All these plans they are all good, but we are now beginning to sound like typical government, where we are very good at planning, but now when it comes to hitting the road, that's when things get a bit sticky. So, but I'm sure there are systems in place by KSA to ensure that the data is being transmitted, but how does it get down to the common mwananchi on the ground? Because we are hungry, we want to eat this cake. Is it free or not?
Thank you, Hezron, for those concerns about, the cake. It's important that we all eat to our full. So this one, I'd like to get one of our directors from KSA to answer. The closest is Charles. Colonel is far from the mic, so you can.
Thank you, Hezron, for your question. Yes, like Jack indicated, there are plans in place to make that data available. We already have a data hub that we are setting up to receive the data. We are hoping to get the first batch of data from June, July, after the testing of the CubeSat has been finalized. And we envision a scenario where data will be made available to the government institutions, the public institutions, for free. Then we'll also develop modalities. Once we are sure of the quality of the data, then we will develop a pricing model for the private sector or any other person that would want to use the data. But again, given that it has been developed using public financing, we do not expect to charge the public sector institutions any money. Maybe also one thing that we also want to encourage, and again, that was mentioned by Prof here, we want to extend the challenge to the universities as well. As we start receiving the data, can you also think about how you can help us process? Because essentially, we're using this as a technology demonstration, and we want to build capacity in our universities. And I like what Patan was indicating in terms of what can we do, or how he has been engaged in terms of going back to his studies to look at what he had studied. We want to begin that process much earlier within the universities, and that's why we have been sharing the research grant. So in a nutshell, we will make that data available freely to the public institutions and then subsequently to the private sector once we are sure of the quality of the data that will be provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. There is one there, 1, 2, 3, 4, then we finish. Be precise.
Yes, thank you. My name is Moses. I'm a geospatial engineering student at TUK. So my question is, it took a couple of days for the satellites to capture high resolution images. So my question is, are you conversant, you as the Kenya Space Agency, with the Taifa 1? For how long, do you know for how long it will going to capture the high resolution images that we are going to use as the data for analysis? So number 2, the nanosatellites are launched 100 to 1,000 kilometers above in the space. So most probably, does that mean that we'll have to have a small field of view? Or so you can expand on that. This is the altitude which is it launched from the Earth.
Well understood. Thank you. So your first question, I guess, speaks to the lifespan of the satellite.
No, for how long is the satellite going to capture the image? Because it takes a couple of days for the satellite to capture high resolution images. For
how
analysis.
long in terms of until it's operational to send images?
Okay, like for example, you know that it moves in orbits. So maybe it moves in Nairobi today. It may move in Nairobi next week.
Also, the revisit time?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Revisit time, I'll give that one to the engineer. What is the revisit time of the satellite in 1 second?
So for Taifa 1, we have a revisit time of about 4 days.
4 days. So every 4 days, it will be imaging Kenya. Your other question was on? Yeah? Or the lifespan of the satellite. How many years before decommissioning? 5?
Not really. It was, I said that the nanosatellites, from the basics, it is launched within 100 to 1,000 kilometers in the space. So does that mean that we are going to have a small field of view to be captured? Because that is a bit low.
Thank you. Yes, it's going to be a low Earth orbiting satellite. Yes?
Yes, so the mission orbit for Taifa 1 will be at about 500 kilometers. The field of view of the camera remains the same, but now the swath changes with the altitude. But the swath for Taifa 1 will be 32 kilometers, which for our kind of mission is good enough.
All right, thank you. Let's move to the second last one. Yes, we are coming to you. You'll be the last one before we wind up.
I am Evans Chege, a data analyst. So my question is, when you get that data from space, can you have neural networks, like artificial intelligence, to analyze the way to traverse space? Yes, that's my question.
All right. Patan, I guess that is you again. Did you get his question?
Well, I think I didn't hear whether the question is for image processing or for orbit propagation.
Or for orbiting propagation.
I am saying now the satellite, now as it traverses space, can you have neural networks in it to be able to analyze data on how you can have a propulsion method of space?
Yes, so I get his question now. He's asking on whether we can do artificial intelligence or machine learning algorithms on the satellite to probably aid in the image capturing process or to aid in the navigation process. So basically the amount of computation required for that is a little high, but as we progress, we are going to be in a position to do that. One risk that we experience, which I think is related to what Professor Baki was mentioning, the more the computational power we have on the satellite, the smaller the IC technology needs to be, and the higher the risks of damage to the satellite. That is why we try to go slow on the computing power for the satellite. But as we get to have more radiation-hardened components that can do machine learning, we are sure to use machine learning to help us with maybe image pre-processing so that we don't have to burden the communication subsystem or the power subsystem or even the payload itself. So we take images, then we filter them on board, then we just download the useful ones.
Thank you, Patan, for that. It answers the question very well. Actually, there are systems that are being developed to do onboard processing chips so that you just, get to download whatever is important. Let's have the last question up there. Is it possible to combine? You seated close together. Anyway, very fast, please. We are running out of time.
Yes, good morning. My name is David Maina. My name is David Maina, and I would like to know, because one of your objectives is to ensure that we have developed capacity in that field. And then number two, you've said that you want to help in agriculture and food security. But now do you have specific indicators to show that maybe once you put everything in place, then those objectives will be met? Then number two, is it cost effective? Today we have Google and everything and NASA and all that. What is the difference between what they are doing and maybe specifically what you are doing locally? Thank you.
Yes, let's have views so that we can finish with the questions.
All right. Good morning. My name is June Hope from JQuat. Maybe just to phrase the question to Mr. Patton over there. One, how long is the decommissioning of the satellites? How long will the decommissioning take, if that makes sense? And secondly, from an engineering perspective, what are the success metrics of Taifa 1? What are you hoping to achieve after the period within which Taifa 1 will be up in air? And then lastly, do we have a means of remote controlling from the ground station to the satellite? Thank you.
Okay, so Patton, I think you can take all those collectively.
Okay, there is the second last question you asked, which wasn't clear, but I'll try to answer the rest. If there's need, we can revisit that one. So the first question was on how the success metrics for Taifa 1, especially for use in agriculture. So we want to look at the quality of images that we get from Taifa 1 to see whether these images are actionable. So if we have actionable images that can help us predict crop yields, that can help us predict the effect of various farm inputs, this is going to be a good measure of success on the agricultural front. And if I can move quickly to the next question. The commissioning phase for Taifa 1 will take a maximum of about 45 days from the time we first establish contact with the satellite after it has been launched. This will involve checking to see whether all the subsystems are functioning accordingly and getting the satellite to be stabilized in orbit. And then at this point, we will be able to begin our mission. Then I didn't get the
How
last.
cost effective?
The cost effective?
Yeah, now that we have Google, what is the edge that our Taifa 1 has
the
over?
advantage of having Taifa 1 is that we can task it very quickly to take images before the 16 days of the other satellites revisiting Kenya come. So with Taifa 1, if we were to wait for maybe 2 weeks or 10 days before we can receive the free data from maybe Sentinel or so, we can have Taifa 1 to cover up during that time, while also having the benefits of capacity building that we have already had.
The other last one was, can you be able to remote control it from down here so that it can?
Yes. So at the Kenya Space Agency, we are setting up a ground station. This basically is the access point to the satellite. We have antennas and the antenna control systems, as well as the mission control software kit. This helps us to track the satellite and also to be able to control it. So to take pictures, to download them, to check the health of the satellite, to troubleshoot the satellite, yes, we can do this from our ground station in Kenya.
Thank you very much. So we're going to have a quick round of the last questions, and of course, as you wind up, so we'll start with Vanessa. I want you to just explain to us what is the nexus between, space education, or what you're doing especially in STEM, and our current education system, CBC. How are you finding linkage in that? Or you're doing parallel things and you think and CBC is doing another one because we need to conform to our national systems? In like a minute.
In like a minute, okay. I'll try to be as brief as possible. So CBC is more, and I think I was having a conversation earlier this morning when having tea about this with Clifford, and CBC is more practical. So I'm sure for those who are supervising homeworks at home, you have possibly witnessed everything that you have been building in the house for school. So for this, I'd say that what YSK is doing and what also KSA is doing in partnership with YSK is that we're trying to see how we can expose all the students to some of what is currently happening. So I don't know, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you are actually studying or are in careers of what you wanted to do when you were young? Just a quick show of hands. That's like 2 people. All right. Then how many of you just found yourself where you are and you decided, okay, fine, kimeumana, let's just continue? Yeah. So most of the time, even for high school students, you find yourself, if you haven't got the grade, say, for medicine, which I presume is popular. You are called, say, for geospatial engineering, and you have no idea what that is, but you have found yourself there, and maybe you don't have the funds or the means to change your course, so that is what you actually have to do. So for us, what we're trying to see is just ensure that kids as early as, I think, junior high school, now that that has started, can be able to know what geospatial engineering is, for example, or astrobiology, or if you're doing electrical engineering, it's not that when you fundi wa stima peke yake, you can be able to do other things within electrical engineering. So what we're just trying to see is how you can have exposure to all of these fields of study, and how you can be able to position yourself in a way that you can be able to grow in that field. And the earlier you get access to some of this information, the better it is. So lastly, as I conclude, is currently we're having a problem with climate change in the world. And everyone, even if it's in Samburu or Mombasa or Nairobi, can feel the impact of climate change. So with this satellite, for example, schools, especially in the junior high school or CBC, can have access to this data, and they can be tuned to see how they can come up with solutions based on the images that are received from the satellite. So now they're able to just know what GIS technology, for example, is, and how they can be able to grow from there. So if we start giving this information early and giving students access to this information early, then we have less kimeumana groups, and we have more people who actually know what they want to achieve. And now we're able to build a nice innovation-driven economy, even for our country, regardless of the cake story that was shared earlier.
Thank you, Vanessa. Patan, in a minute, what are some of the opportunities that entrepreneurs can capitalize on, especially in space technology talent that we have in Kenya?
Yeah, so I mentioned a few challenges that we experienced in this journey, and I think those are areas that entrepreneurs can capitalize on. For example, how do we test our satellite components? We need what we call assembly, integration, and testing facilities. So because there is a huge interest in space technology, not only in Kenya, but even across Africa, this is a place where entrepreneurs can come together and begin setting up some of these facilities. We also have manufacturing facilities. So I think if our entrepreneurs can capitalize on some of these areas, we can help one another. Also, we have actual manufacturing services. That is, you design your own boards, and then you bring them over. We can see if they are useful enough for our missions. Maybe we can be able to partner and have them working for us in our space missions.
Thank you. That is very precise. Entrepreneurs, are you hearing? And this is not just people in startups already. We are talking about the young people in universities. I've seen people developing very nice things from university, so you can start thinking about that one. And then, Professor, now that you're the most experienced of the panelists, just briefly highlight the importance of collaboration between academia, the industry, and private sector and the government, especially now in our space ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you very much. Until knowledge is translated from theory into goods and services, it will not serve humanity. What we do at the universities is to do the instrumentation. We can develop things, prototypes, like the nanosatellites we did last time. The next level is to ensure that this can be commercialized so that it can do business. And that way, you are creating a link between the universities and, of course, academia. The government comes in this way. So far, so good. Kenya Space Agency is supporting universities to develop their capacities, build capacity in the area of satellite engineering. But their finances are limited. The chairman of National Research Fund is here, and I think he should say something, Professor Micheka. NRF should come in a big way to finance universities to be able to develop the infrastructure for research. I think that is the only way we can move forward. They are trying their best, but I think they have also very limited budgets. But let me prod also Professor Ogengo here. What I left in Chiromo, astronomy and astrophysics, I understand is one of the programs you want to scrap. You will be doing a great disservice to this country. It is the only thing we have for basic space science. Think about it.
Thank you for those, please, Professor Baki. Professor Micheka, you're hearing, and I acknowledge your support to the Kenya Space Agency, especially when it comes to research grants. We've had a very good working relationship. And also to speak on space science and astronomy, you've had SKAs coming up, and we're also setting up a few optical observatory stations around the country, so we're going to need those professionals. I also rejoin my very good professor in saying, please don't scrap that unit. Dr. Cosmas, what kind of help would you like to appeal to, especially as you guide students in space research and innovation in the university? What more would you like, NRF is here, the stakeholders, even we have partners in the industry, to just be able to do so that we can support you to churn out, students that are ready to take over the space sector in the industry.
Okay, thank you. My experience in the last 2 years I've been here is that, just as Prof has said, that until we are able to translate that theoretical knowledge into goods and services, and that from an engineering perspective, that is systems, then we may not achieve the aspirations we have as a nation. And I remember, for example, the Vision 2030. When I started hearing about it, that was after graduating from high school in 2007. It sounded something that was very far away. And to some of us, we thought it's some other people that will be pursuing it. But fast forward, 15 years later, we are among the people kind of driving that vision. And therefore, what I would want to pass across people in a position to ensure that we take this country forward in terms of research and technology is that they should think about the young people, because those will be the bearers of some of the visions that we have as a country. For the Vision 2030, some of the forebearers are no longer with us. The former president, Mwai Kibaki, the vision is synonymous with him, but he is no longer with us here today. So the people in a position to make a difference in terms of contributing to the technology growth of our country, they should play their part. And Kenya Space Agency has played that role in their specific field, but it is not the only agency in the government, because I do not think there is a policy or a law that prohibits, some government agency from partnering with universities and kind of funding some of the research they might be interested in or they might benefit from. So what KSA is doing is a challenge to other government agencies. I know there is an NRF, which is mandated to offer these kind of grants. But if we want to benefit our young people and to put this country, at a pedestal in terms of technology development, we need to rope in more agencies, especially in their areas of interest. For example, we have things to do with the power. That is, we have KPLC, we have KenGen. There is nothing that prohibits them from doing the same thing that KSA is doing. We have for example, and this is just an example, we have this electioneering. We spend to the tune of 40 billion for an election. And out of all that budget, I don't think there is anything that probably has gone into research, like for how long will we be getting this technology from outside? What is some of these agencies responsible for those kind of things? What are they doing to see that in future some of these systems will be in-house, they will be developed in-house? So for me, that is my message to the agencies and to the chairpersons of these agencies, that you can look at how you can utilize the human capacity here that to develop technology and to solve our problems using the minds locally.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cosmas Kariuki. That is a very, very good appeal to all of you. So I think it's time to wind up. We've come to the end of our panel discussion, and kindly I would like you to give a round of applause to yourselves and also to the panelists for that engagement. Thank you very much. And now, my panelists, you can take your seats in the audience as we prepare for the next panel with my co-moderator, Neema Mutemi.
Thank you very much, Jack. Can we all clap for my co-moderator, Jack Matara? So as you may have noticed, the program looks slightly different than what we had anticipated. For those who may not know, the rocket that was carrying Taifa 1 satellite cannot deploy today. So we have at least 24-hour delay that we are anticipating. So we are expecting that instead of launching in the next 10 minutes, or deploying the satellite in the next 10 minutes as we had hoped, it will happen exactly the same time tomorrow. That notwithstanding, we have continued with the panel, and we're having quite some enlightening and exciting conversations. We've just finished the first panel. I would like to invite members of the second panel to come to the stage, and then we will conclude with the Taifa 1 presentation. Members of the press release is at the front desk, but feel free to cover this, and then we will make the video available for you to package the full news story from today. So thank you, and this is part of learning, the intricacies that go into operating the space economy. We have to plan for what we can't control. So members of the second panel will be led by Professor Faith Karanja from the University of Nairobi. Makofi kwake tafadhali. Followed by Charles Mwangi from the Kenya Space Agency. Makofi. And Vivian Mehta, Locate IT. I have a feeling we are going to meet the two-third gender rule on this panel. And last but not least, Cliff Okembo from S3 East Africa. So unlike in the first panel, we are done with the academics, so we want to go into practicals. So I think I'll pick up from where Jack and the panel left. Now that we understand, the opportunities and the gaps in research and education, we want to see where the jobs are and where the economy is going to benefit from this panel. So this is the job I want to put you to task to deliver for us. So we want we'll be looking at highlights on the importance of the space economy in driving innovation and development globally, and also in our local context in Kenya. We'll also be highlighting the potential of space technology to transform industries as our country continues to recover from COVID-19 and the ongoing global financial stress. So, to start us off, I would like to invite Mr. Charles Mwangi. Charles, you work for the Kenya Space Agency. You're very familiar with, where the agency has reached up to now and what we are expecting from Taifa 1. But we want you to give us a more larger overview. Discuss the current state of the global space economy and how it has evolved over the years, and paint for us a picture on what this looks like for Kenya. Where are we ranking? Tuko number muzuri? Are we still very small players in the space economy? And what are some tangible opportunities for Kenya as we grow in this industry?
Thank you, Nema. My name is Charles Mwangi. I'm the Acting Director, Space Sector and Technology Development. To your question in terms of where we are at, I would say we are in a good space. It's quite difficult to quantify space or the space sector, but some of the research that has been done indicate we are talking about 300, 400 to 500 billion USD in terms of the global space sector. Of that, Africa contributes to about, what was quantified is about 20 billion currently. That was the research that was done in 2022. Meaning that we are only at about 5% of the global space sector. In terms of what Kenya is contributing is much lower than that. But we are trying to see a scenario where we do contribute more. And I also want to segment it in terms of the operations. The majors, where the money is essentially in applications. There is quite a lot also in terms of the launch business, the manufacturing business, and also the ground segment. But when you look at it in terms of the segmentation of the industry, navigation does contribute about 50% of the money that is within the 400 billion USD that I was talking of. We're also talking about satellite communication is about 40%. Then 10% is between Earth observation and the other applications. But that is still a huge amount. And if you're able to establish a niche for us as a country, then we'll be able to go far. And that is why we're making deliberate efforts. And I liked the discussion that was happening there earlier in terms of what can we do more? What are the elements that we're putting in place so that, again, the generation that is also working out will also have opportunities to have jobs into the future as we go on.
Thank you very much. I'd like to move on to Professor Faith Karanja. Prof, you represent University of Nairobi, who we like to consider ourselves as pioneers in this sector. So my question to you is, and University of Nairobi has, some experience. So I want you to give us a critique of what you see as the role of government in driving the growth of the space economy in Kenya. And I want you to speak to a few issues. I want you to speak to, creating an enabling environment for investments, local and foreign investments. I want you to also speak to government policies. What is the policy scape like? And what does the government of Kenya need to do to improve this?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Professor Faith Karanja from the University of Nairobi, Department of Geospatial and Space Technology. Yes, the government has a big role to play with regard to growing the space sector. When you look at the kind of users we have today, we have people who know what they need. And so this places the government in a position where they need to be accountable. In fact, as we do this launch, and I remember even as we did the launch of the first Icon satellite, we had media, interrogating us and asking us, so you're launching this satellite, so how is it going to benefit us as the common mwananchi? So how is it going to put food on the table? So you find that, yes, there's a lot that satellite data does assist the government to do, but it appears that there's a gap in terms of the education and the awareness that people have on the ground in terms of what this technology is actually supposed to helping them with. And so when it comes to the government being in a position of accountability where people are putting in their money, tax money, to do all these technological innovations, the government has a major role to play in ensuring that whatever they're doing is translating into tangible economic benefits to the common mwananchi. When it comes to also ensuring that we grow this sector, yes, a lot has to be done in terms of providing an enabling environment. Here we are talking about policies. I remember when we started the journey of having the Kenya Space Agency, it was a journey, and so we have come a long way. Now we have the Kenya Space Agency, we have the policy in place, but we still need to do a lot more in order to ensure that we grow this sector. Because when people talk about space, they just think about space. It's so foreign. But yet what we are seeing is that this sector has the capacity to also develop the fine technology that the 21st century requires. We have our students who are going through our programs in science and engineering. We are talking about the 21st century skills. We want to be able to grow artificial intelligence skills, machine learning, robotics. We want them to develop capacity in critical thinking, collaborative skills, which actually you find space science and technology provides a platform for. So in terms of having this enabling environment, we find that there's a lot that, yes, needs to be done. And space science and technology is actually bringing this to the fore. How also do we mainstream some of these technologies so that we have these inculcated also in our curriculums? Because we need to ensure that our curriculum are relevant for the 21st century skills, so that as we train our students, our graduates, we are just not training them for the sake of training them. We want them to be, to fit in the market, in the global market that we are in currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. And I want to move to Cliff. Cliff, you're an employer in this sector. So as a former student leader, I have to ask this. Show us the jobs. Where are we telling the students to get? Who is employing them and what jobs are they getting? And I want you to dissect this for us in the context of, we have Malindi Space Station, is it fully utilized? Where do you see, in an idealistic world as a private sector, where do you see great potential? What will it take to actually attract investments and to push the government to do more so that the private sector can expand in their role in the sector and create more jobs? So give us some tangible examples. Feel free to ideate and draw examples from the best.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting question, and I guess all students are looking at me because they're asking for where are the opportunities or where are the jobs. Well, the very interesting answer is that jobs are all over or are everywhere. But look at it slightly critical, that each and every decisions that are made are actually made of a space over an area somewhere that something is happening that is interesting for that kind of decision. And it's also interesting that it's a question about data, and data transforms or data makes the decision happen. But see, this raw data is actually useless without something that they have to do to make it useful for that decision. And so the data analytics is actually the power that our current students that are being produced have at their hands. Now, take a slight step back and look at the imagery as one key data set that we use. And try to imagine the kind of information that we are able to extract from imagery. Now, think about the decisions that government are doing now. We are talking about climate change, as had been mentioned. We are talking about food security or scarcity. We are talking about disasters, floods, and everything else that are happening. And try to imagine that where do we get all this information? We get all this information from data, geospatial data imagery, that now we have different sources, including the satellite that is being launched now. But you also want to think about the technology that we are using that is evolving every day. And you realize that different tools, different innovations are coming in, and students here are also partaking into them. You've heard the artificial intelligence being mentioned by Prof, the machine learning, deep learning, and many other things using IoT devices and many others that are helping us to go from the traditional ways that we were giving an example, we were doing image supervised classification, for example, to now that you could use very interesting algorithms in the machine learning world to be able to give us information almost instantly. Now, this opens a very big opportunity for the jobs, and also for the government to make decisions, and also to inform policies and everything else that we do. Now, while our current Excellency, the President, is fighting climate change through planting trees, then you want to ask ourselves, how, where, which trees, and many other things. What informs that? We go back to the imageries, doing suitability analysis and many other things that you think about them. Is the government sufficient, or is the government alone able to do all this? And then you realize that immediately the collaboration with the private sector comes in handy, that government has to work with the private sector and academia to bring a complete, a powerful duo, let me call it a trio, that makes everything else work. While private sector will always run very fast, very innovative, and bring in several tools, academia with the researchers and very interesting ideas, testing different tools that make sense, while government implements, developing policy and many other things. And so all these, you cannot separate them. You want to go hand in hand with all of them. And this creates a very big doors actually, of opportunities to all of us, to innovators, to students, to the industry, and even to the government at the end of the day. Thank you.
Okay, and I want Vivian to continue answering that question. Vivian, do we want to see a Kenya spaceport? Do we, in terms of utilization, are we fully utilizing the current capacity that we have? What do you see as opportunities, especially, for if we want private sector to do more in terms of growing this economy? Okay, so good morning. My name is Vivian Meta. I am a geomatic engineer by training, and I currently run operations at Locate Limited, which is a geo-ICT company based here in Nairobi. To answer your question, Nema, with regards to current utilization and how much more needs to be done in order to fully exploit the potential that space technology presents to us.
I think pulling in these, my thoughts as a country, Kenya specifically, I think there is still a lot that needs to be done. But first and foremost, I think we have to applaud the efforts that especially the Kenya Space Agency is putting in place. Ever since its establishment, we have been able to see a sector that is now seemingly thriving. Seemingly, Space Agency has been able to come in and promote or try to ensure that they really do promote the benefits or the utilization of space technologies, and that is why we're here today, specifically launching Taifa 1. Now, as an industry player, very specifically in the Earth observation space, we still see a lot of opportunities in there, and the reason why these technologies, particularly as a country or through even government, are still lagging behind is because of the lack of demonstration of applications that can begin to feed into solving the different societal problems we undergo as a country or as a region. And in that space, then you're talking about trying to spur or looking into opportunities that will spur innovation directly coming from the theoretical aspects that are taught, say in school, from the technological or educational that we'll be doing through some of these satellites, to ensuring that even the data that is going to be produced, for instance, from this satellite, will be utilized, will be used to create applications that solve our day-to-day projects or problems as a country. Very broadly, the applications of Earth observation data can be, utilized in everything that happens in space and time, and I don't think there's nothing that happens in this world that doesn't happen in space and time. So with that regard, I think it's really a call to us, all of us as sector players. As industry, I think we're really looking to ensure that we build applications that can be commercialized, that can, that can bring out the nitty-gritties of the technology without specifically everyone understanding, because somebody said space technologies itself sounds very alien, sounds very complicated. But don't you think that is the reason why then as a sector we are still struggling with its uptake, for instance? Because one example is given for how we're able to transact via M-Pesa. But at the end of the day, when I, for instance, my grandmother money in the village, she does not understand the technology behind it. All she needs to know is how that she has received money and she's able to extract in various forms. And so as an industry, then the buck stops with us to ensure that we're able to push the applications much more of the downstream applications, so that more investment is actually going into creation or development of downstream services and products that will benefit the common person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. And I want to go around again. Charles, do you have something to add?
Yes, because you asked about the spaceport.
Yes.
And maybe if I can reiterate back, when I was giving the metrics, I didn't share the dimension of the commercial space sector. About 75 thereabouts % of the space economy is being led by the private sector. And that creates a lot of opportunities for us as a country to spur. You asked where the businesses are, and we see that as an opportunity for the sector. And part of the reason why we are engaging the universities is because we are hoping that the universities will plant the seeds to the students who are engaged in learning, so that they understand what the opportunities are within the market. And you're hoping that the universities will take the cue and provide that. And you're also hoping that what we've seen in other developed countries, where universities also develop entities or units that provide solution to government. because we say the universities have the capability for doing research. And we are hoping that if you can have like incubation centers, accelerator hubs within the university, so that the students, when they graduate from the universities, they have an understanding of what the needs of the sectors are. Because we're saying there is huge potential. Will they get formal employment from the institutions that are represented here? Maybe not. Maybe 25% or even less will get that employment. But if we provide them with the opportunities out there, then it becomes more meaningful. On the launch from Malindi, and Dr. Mongela, who had initially done an initial study with his students on where we could locate the spot, that is something that we're exploring, because when I talked about the whole space sector ecosystem, we want to see how much we can tap into all these sectors. And again, create opportunities, especially for the students who are up there, and also those people who want to set up companies. And our role as government is to create the appetite and the uptake of their technologies, so that when they move out from these premises, or even for the universities to have a way where they're able to generate more revenue and also provide solution. Because the same question that Vivian was indicating, how do we impact the common person, and we could leverage on the potential that is available within the universities and beyond.
Let's actually not let you off the hook on that. So it said that Kenya actually has very ideal weather situation, weather conditions. What would it take for us to prepare ourselves? And this is, we can go around answering this question. What would it take for Kenya to attract Elon Musk to start launching some of the 200 launches per year, quote unquote, in Kenya? What would it take for us to be ready for that kind of investment? And what would be the benefits of that kind of engagement?
Well, that's very interesting again. The first thing is that what it takes first is for us to start or continue utilizing our infrastructure. Now, and that means that when we are utilizing it, then we are able to continuously invest in it. And once we invest in it being the best of the breeds or among the best, then it means that everybody else is attracted to it. That's one way of thinking about it. The second way of thinking about it is exactly what you're doing, sensitizing everybody else of the value of space technology, and why we should think about it and why we should invest on it. Now, when that happens, then it means that it's a center that attracts, in quotes, everyone. Now, because it's that critical center, then, of course, it becomes important for everyone. If it goes beyond Kenya, or beyond us, to everybody else, again, in quotes, in the whole country, and it's, good news always go far and wide. So all other investments. Now, when you think about investment in space, you want to imagine why we invest on roads more than space. Well, basically because everybody uses road, and when they are poor, then everybody complains. So, for us to invest more in space, then we also have to ensure that everybody understands why it is important. If I have to wake up, and before I step out of the house, I check on weather, for example, and I know it's very reliable and it's that very important for me to check before I step out. If a farmer would like to plant, he checks on some information, as Vivian was saying, that we need to have information in our fingertips, irrespective of how they're developed. And we connect that to, hey, it's about space. Now, this space is a very important thing that as we see it, as the policy makers see it, be it in cabinet, in different boardrooms, they think about it, they invest on it, and everybody else, including, as you are saying, Elon Musk, will also think about it and will also value the same, because we treasure it and investing in it, and it's also transforming us, it's transforming our lives, and the impact is felt from Mama Mboga.
So if I can take it from there, we need the private sector. But for the private sector to come on board, we need to have the right policies and regulations to be in place. And I want to first acknowledge our board of directors, who we have not had an opportunity of acknowledging, and I hope we get an opportunity to do that, because one of the challenges they've thrown to us at the agency is that we need to develop the policy at the earliest. And because that sets the boundaries on which we operate from. And if you are cognizant of the need of the private sector, then we need to put interventions in place to ensure that the private sector feel comfortable to invest their money within the sector. And then potentially also as government, we have to create the appetite. And I think there was a challenge that was posed to Professor Ratemo and NRF. How can we have more funding available? Because when people see the activities within a particular sector, then of course the public sector follows where government funding goes. And you're hoping that that is one of the things that we'll be able to do as we go along.
Thank you.
Yes, from the academia side, we have lots of interest. Like currently, we continue getting interest from partners out there who want to partner with us in terms of also designing satellites for, different applications. And that points to us that, yes, there's a lot of potential. There's something that they're seeing that we have a capacity for. And so that tells us that we need to have that enabling environment, like Charles has mentioned, not only with the private sector, but also with academia, because if we were to move that direction, then obviously we need to have an enabling environment that will help us, bring on board not only the private sectors locally, but also international partners who have demonstrated that they have an interest and they also want to come on board in helping us build the capacity in the space sector. Thank you.
And actually, let me just interrupt a bit. Can we all clap up for ourselves? Because I think this is one perfect example of industry, academia, and government collaboration. Don't you think? We've at least done well so far. So we can clap for ourselves so far. In the space industry in Kenya, at least, or do you want to contradict this, Prof? I'm hoping that, from your sentiments, we have had collaboration with government that can be strengthened, right? Yeah. And with private sector? Okay, Vivian, wrap that up for us.
Okay, yeah, probably just going to feed into the specific components on policy. And I think that's an area that as a country and as industry, we're really, really struggling with. And I'll give examples very particularly relating to the county government structures. So some of you may be aware that we have a County Government Act that dictates the establishment of GIS, for instance, database systems. And these database systems, as an industry, probably would be developed from data sets that come from the Earth observation satellites, to be precise. And since already at that county government level, there is legal anchorage that supports the existence or the preparation or the utilization of this data, then you find that more and more counties are getting onboarded onto establishing these data platforms that they can use for their decision-making processes. Now, the challenge comes in at national government level, where I think at national level we have no clear policies that, mandate or integrate or give anchorage to the utilization of Earth observation data. And I think we are at that point as a country, of course, with regards to the launch of Taifa 1, where now the discussion in the earlier panel going into the specific utilization of these data sets, can we, as all the actors here, start pushing for the enabling environments that the policies, a national policy, Earth observation or GIS policy can create, in order that each and every, say, government entity can be mandated to, feed or tap into the existence of this data at their own capacities? Can we try to ensure that we institutionalize Earth observation or geospatial technicians within different agencies in the country. Because you look at it, if you, for instance, go into the human resource structure of most of these agencies, you will see they probably have an ICT technician, expert. It's clearly indicated somewhere. But for even some of the government agencies, such as those relating to agriculture or forestry or climate change, you will never see somewhere where there is a clear indication that this role, there is supposed to be a role that will bring on board maybe an Earth observation expert to help with the data, creation of data that is going to influence the decision-making processes in that specific sector. So this is a call really for us, and it's a good starting point to ensure that at every government level, and I think there's very good examples from the South African side, where I think the South African government has been able, through the Space Agency, has been able to ensure that they have access to Earth observation data, and they use this data to give each and every government agency in the country and develop applications that meet their needs. So really, I think that would just be my contribution to it. As we launch Taifa 1, let's start thinking around, or let's start pushing for creation of a national policy that is going to institutionalize and give anchorage to utilization of this data. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for reminding us that we also need to involve county governments. I don't know if we invited them to participate today, but very important in terms of decision making. So as we conclude this, I'm going to just read a few facts here, because I'm seeing, in terms of utilization of data, the government is doing quite well. Right? We've got Kenya Forest Service, has been using satellite data to monitor assessment projects, which run countrywide. Cliff had talked about, management of forests. KEMRI, the Kenya Medical Research Institute, has used satellite data to map malaria prevalence and predict disease outbreaks, especially in 2016. KALRO is also using satellite data to develop climate-smart agriculture practices, such as precision agriculture. We also have, ISIPE, which is using satellite data to monitor and predict the spread of locust swarms in Africa, and I think, in the management of the desert locust outbreak in 2019 to 2020, late 2020, we all experienced that. NDMA is using satellite data, satellite-based data, employing techniques such as normalized difference vegetation index to monitor drought conditions and inform, so that's, and of course, the government of Kenya, following the 2007 to 2008 post-election violence in Kenya, used satellite imagery to map out, the extent of destruction of property and displacement of people. So those are some of the ways in which we can see the government actively, leading from the front in terms of utilizing and demonstrating, the capabilities. So my final question to the panel today is, to move from, today, of course, in the next 24 hours, we launch Taifa 1, which is, we have repeatedly had, the Kenya Space Agency and the Ministry of Defense saying, this is only the beginning of a journey that Kenya is going on. Around July, we want to believe that we'll be launching, the receiver station at Kasarani. So between now and July, and also post-July when, Taifa 1 is fully operational and we are receiving this data, where do you want to call investors, to call development partners, to call donors and government and even county governments to invest their attention and resources? Where specifically are you seeing direct gaps where we need, human and financial resources to be deployed so that we can begin to actually, move from being too academic to actually demonstrating, Kenya's use of this data to grow the economy and also for evidence-based decision-making? Can we start with Vivian this time round and, and finish with Cliff?
Okay. Back to you. Are you looking for this in terms of like sectoral approaches or just in general?
Oh, yes. Sectoral is more specific, so please, we want tangible. If we have donors, we've actually been live streaming. So what are you telling people to do? Where do you need resources? If the MD of, and we had this challenge, the MD of KBC joined us, last week, and he said, I pay so much money, for the satellite services to host his satellite, What are we saying? Where do you want people to put money so that they can help to catalyze our journey to where we need to be?
Okay. So I'll be very biased towards the downstream application services investment, again, because I believe we're really at a point where a lot of the people who need to use the space technologies itself are not even aware that they have a solution in space technologies. So then, therefore, it means that we need to really emphasize and put a lot more effort in the downstream applications. I'm not trying to say that the upstream investments are not necessary, but they are very, very necessary in the long run, and all of it can go together, hand in hand. But more emphasis really are placed within the downstream application services. And then when it comes to the sectoral approaches, particularly the applications of EO data can be applied in literally every sector you can think about globally. Name it, education, energy, environment, telecommunications, whatever other industry you can think about, including even medicine, really has a lot of backing of the space technologies and particularly Earth observation data. And if I was to be very fair, maybe looking at it from a country perspective, where we have, globally, of course, there is your sustainable development goals that are very clear on how every country, for instance, is supposed to be reporting progress. And the only other way these countries would be able to report progress would be through the utilization of Earth observation data to understand where we have been, to understand where we are, and to also measure where we will get to by 2030. That is through the trends and projections that you can be able to, produce from some of this data. Locally, at national level, there's a lot of, focus on, for instance, I think right now there's talk of the Big Five agenda. Big Five agenda covering agriculture and food security. You're talking of ICT technologies. You're talking of housing and manufacturing. And this particularly also integrating to one of the global most, challenges of climate change, for instance, where you are able to link and start to demonstrate that we can use this data to understand our environments in ways that we can also start appreciating conservation measures. Because once you're able to see the transformation that has occurred through the map stories that are produced from Earth observation data, then you're able to tell really the huge challenges that would come in scenarios where we continue to degrade our environments in very many ways. So in a nutshell, I think I would go for food security and climate change as the key sectors that we can be able to demonstrate, and we really need to apply a lot of focus on, and also on disaster management in itself. Thank you.
One thing I think I would want to say from the onset is that satellites, by the time they're being launched into space, they are mission-oriented. The Taifa one, which is going to be launched in the next few hours, we have seen it has many areas of application. It is a multispectral satellite. We have been told many areas of application that it is going to address. The tendency would be to think that at the end of Taifa 1, once it has been launched and started downstreaming to us data, then we no longer have food security issues, we no longer have environmental issues and all that kind of thing. So I think it is important to understand that satellites, as much as we have many of them orbiting in space, including this one of ours that is going to be launched soon, not one of them can solve all problems. And so understanding that it is important. And so my take is that we think global, but act local. We have very unique challenges at the local level. The local challenges that we may be having, for instance, maybe food security, maybe in one county may not be exactly the same in terms of magnitude in another county. And if you are to disaggregate this even to lower levels, you find that the challenges would also be unique. And therefore, that speaks to the kind of data that would need in terms of granularity that would address specific problems in specific areas. So what kind of interventions or collaboration, or even in, support would we be seeking for when it comes to this realm of space technology? So when we talk about the space ecosystem, we are talking about from sensors to areas of application. And when we are thinking about areas of application, we're also thinking about, how do you transform this data into addressing those unique challenges? We do not have enough capacity that can address those unique challenges at those lower levels. So in terms of data modeling, data processing, we still need to up our game in that regard. The other thing I'm also seeing as a good opportunity this Taifa One is bringing to us or presenting to us is that we already have a launch pad in Malindi. And I think this is an opportunity we need now to relook at and see how do we revamp this launch pad in Malindi so that we also bring other, because we are at a unique position, to launch other satellites, even big satellites. We have seen also in the documentary that other satellites, big satellites, are being launched from that. So we have now an opportunity as a country to demonstrate that, yes, we can also have that infrastructure revamped so that we bring other partners, other countries, launching their satellites from there. And that will be a revenue source for the country. And this is among many other areas of intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Let's move to the gentleman now.
Thank you, and for the question, and I have quite a number of suggestions and proposals, and I totally agree with Prof when she says that not one satellite can address the issues that you're grappling with. So we need more, and I liked also that in her closing statement that she indicated we have an opportunity to start having the conversations of whether the possibility of having launch happening from our country. And I hope that happens during my lifetime because it will be a momentous time or an opportunity for us to experience that. It happened many years ago, and we hope that that is one of the things that we can help facilitate the conversations. Again, we operate in a limited budget. That is one of the areas we would want to explore how we could get funding to set up a spaceport to launch. That is one dimension. The other dimension is Taifa One satellite allows us now to have the conversation on what more can we do? What more satellites? Are we able to have a constellation? Because the aspiration is to have a constellation. Are we able to have more similar satellites being launched with higher capability? Last week we had conversations with Planet that has over 200 satellites that have capability of doing imaging every day. Are we able, as a country, lead that conversation also within the region and see whether we can have more? The team from, we had Patton here who was involved in the Taifa One satellite. They said they developed a board. And then the question that we are posing to the students here and the private sector is, can they take up the initiative? Because we're saying there is that need. Can they take the initiative to start developing subsystems that can be used within the main in the development of the satellite? As we also explore how we can launch that from the region, In the interim, of course, we'll explore other options. That is on the upstream. Of course, there is a ground receiver station as a service, and also the data processing that was also mentioned by the prof. But also more importantly is how much are we using the data? And fundamentally, most of the application requires us to have the data being available somewhere. We have pockets of this data in different institutions, and one of the things that we are putting in place at the Kenya Space Agency is that unified platform where that data can be accessible. Why is that important? Because if you have a startup that wants to develop a mobile app, then they can get their data from somewhere that they know would be available over the long term. And we are hoping that that would also catalyze, especially on the downstream, the activities within the private sector. And we are hoping that also, we are also trying to encourage, because we have a vibrant IT sector, to see how they can spin into space and provide solutions. Because again, we have the concepts of AI. How do we again leverage on the new technologies so that we can develop insight from the data? Because it is one thing to have the data, but you have to make that data meaningful by generating insight that also addresses the societal need. And we hope that all the players within the value chain, including the students who are in this room, because tomorrow they will be the ones who will be the CEOs of the companies that you're saying there is potential within the space sector, that they see that as an opportunity and then they start working towards that. And essentially we are saying Taifa 1 is just that one element that begins the conversation.
Yeah, it's always good to be the last one because you don't have much to say. But I think that while we are talking about the different solutions that Taifa 1 is bringing once we start receiving the data, the food security, agriculture, and many other things, I think that there's still more work that has to be done once we have the data, because the data in itself will still need people to be able to interpret the data and to bring the meaningful information that could aid in the decision making. And so I think that immediately, if possible, between now and then, or immediately, you want to invest in more capacity to these people who are entrusted to process this data. I want to look at the different MDAs to be able to take advantage of that data, plus other Earth observation data, to quickly make decisions that could help the country. You know, a lot of things that we've talked about that are disturbing the country now, yeah? If it is not drought, it is floods, yeah? Very ironical. But we need, since data is available or shall be available, we need that information, we need that decision to be made, early warnings and many other things, plus all the other applications. You know, many a times I think about, while we like to do affordable housing, we consult real estate developers and banks, right? But we don't consult the geo experts. But that's not a bad thing. It's only bad that no one is aware that they have a critical role to play. And these are very unique areas that capacity development is required. So once we have the data, we are immediately able to take advantage of it. And at the same time, there is relevant to that investment and more investment in research in space science, launching many satellites that we expect to see from Malindi, not in the US. And at the same time, the final area of investment, you also like to think about the infrastructure to process or to manage this data or these processes that we are talking about, which I believe is not cheap. Bit computing infrastructure, the network and many other things, the servers, and you know, we are talking about imagery, which is not light. So you want to imagine that we also invest in these MDAs and different sectors that they are able, they have the capacity, because there could be data in KSA data center somewhere, but the guy is expected to pick that data and use it might not because of their infrastructure. So that's another area that you would like to think about. And it goes on and on, even to the cloud technologies, be it from Konza Technopolis or from Amazon or wherever that we want that to be. But we want to look at it wholesomely, that once we have the data, we have the people ready to process that data, and I believe universities are coming in very strong in this, and other private sectors. But at the same time, we have the ability, behold the human resource, we have the ability in terms of infrastructure to process these and get the relevant information that are required. Thank you.
Wow, that was a great conversation, don't you think? Please help me to appreciate the panel. So can we have 5 questions? Okay, I've got 1, 2, 3. Ladies, where are you? 4, the last one? Okay. Do I have someone helping to...
Thank you very much indeed, really, the panelists and the moderator and the earlier ones. I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to say one thing. Can I just make a very short statement, Madam Chair, please? Number one, I really think that you have really explained to the best of our knowledge the kind of data, utilization, collaboration, visibility of Kenya and the University of Nairobi outside. And the actual linkage between universities and industry seems to take root. Mine is to say this: as the chairperson of National Research Fund, we cut across. We favor everybody, and we would actually completely encourage similar research to be done. But my request, Madam Moderator, is simple, really, that the data collected be collaborated with data available. You will make a lot of difference by using that information to make corrections below and in Kenya. And I can see very useful information on early warning systems on environment, climate change, disease occurrence, soil degradation, blue economy, water degradation, and even housing. Mine is to thank you all, really, appreciation, and that I'm glad I came to this very important sitting, and I wish us as a country, as a university, as linkages, industry between universities and linkages, the best of the information we get. And the youth have been very active. I just was watching. Even when they were asking questions on the cake, they were asking after that, then what comes next? And you have completely explained the reasons for this kind of launch. I thank you, Madam Moderator, and wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. So we had 2 questions on the 3rd row here, and then a few more on the right.
Hello. Now, I wanted to ask, why is it so important that the military must... My name is Yankami, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask this question. Why is it necessary to have a military component in launching this Taifa 1 satellite, while the rocket that is being used is a private concern?
Good question. We'll pack the questions and then we'll answer them together. So I will send that to Charles.
Hello, my name is Joseph Njoroge. I'm an ICT professional and tech content creator. So my question is regarding the issue of space debris. It is especially to Mr. Mwangi from KSA. So how long will this Taifa 1 be operational, and what plan do we have to decommission it, and how the extent of the space debris that will be left, or what plan do we have in regards to the space debris or decommissioning it? Thank you very much.
And Charles, please, as you answer that, tell us whether we have a space pollution policy in place as Kenya?
Okay, good morning. My name is Lawrence Modime. I'm a mechanical engineering student at JQuat. So my first question is, I have two questions. My first question is, one of the issues talked in the first panel was the limitations in terms of the human capital and the infrastructure. And I think those two are very important in the gradual commercialization of the space program. So is there a framework for building this human capital and infrastructure? And if so, what is the progress on it? And then on to the second question. I've heard talks about the spaceport. So my question is the KSA or any private player thinking about eventually somewhere down the line building homegrown rockets, that is designing and making the rockets here in Kenya, because I think that will have massive commercialization input in terms of building industries and other support industries in design and manufacturing. Thank you.
Good question, thank you. Where are the ladies?
Hello everyone, I'm Bill Rono, a medical student from the University of Nairobi. I'm also an enthusiast of telemedicine. I'll direct my questions to Mr. Charles and Mr. Okembo possibly. We understand that 60 years after independence, Kenya is still fighting disease, poverty, and illiteracy. My interest is in disease. The Kenyan government...
Please start the question again without looking too far from the microphone.
I'm sorry. I'm saying I'm an enthusiast of telemedicine, and we understand 60 years after independence, we are still fighting disease, among other things. So my question will be basically about telemedicine. The Kenyan government has taken steps to improve telemedicine. That's with the formation of the Kenya Health Informatics Association that manages and coordinates activities of telemedicine in the country. So yesterday, as we were discussing with my classmates, they were not able to come here. They sent me to ask a few questions, which I'll just ask them. They're more of rhetorical questions. Rather, call.
Vivian Cliff, you can take that.
I'll read them. Will Kenya Taifa 1 satellite be used to improve telemedicine services in the country, especially in remote areas? Will the satellite be used to monitor and respond to outbreaks of infectious diseases in real time, and how will this improve the country's disease surveillance and control efforts? Will the satellite be used to improve disaster response, such as during natural disaster or humanitarian crisis, and how will this benefit the health of affected population? Will the satellite be used to improve access to clean water and sanitation facilities in undeserved areas, which are the major contributors to many preventable diseases? How will the satellite contribute to the development of healthcare infrastructure and capacity building in Kenya, particularly in rural areas where healthcare access and resources are limited?
Okay. Prof, happy to support Charles. I think he's going to be overwhelmed with the questions. Okay, thanks. Our last question, there's one here in front. He had his hand raised. These students came prepared for you.
Yes, I'm still Moses, a geospatial engineering student at TUK. So my question is, so I see you are in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense. So my question is, will the data gathered from the Taifa 1 satellite be able to be applicable by the Kenya Defense Forces in navigation and intelligence? Then number two, I heard Karanja mention about our space station near Malindi. So my question is, I'll be a bit direct, that why mbona hatukutumia the space station that we have? Instead, we are using the SpaceX of Elon Musk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll pause there and move on. And Charles, please demystify this. Is this a way of the military surveilling Kenyans? Or what is the military doing in this Earth observation business? I don't know if this is working.
Yeah, looks like I've been put on the spot or the Kenya Space Agency. Why the engagement with the military? There are two components. The launch is happening in a military base in the US, and that's why, and again, SpaceX uses the platform that is available for them. On the question, I'll also tie it to the defense applications. All the applications that, again, they're diverse applications, and Prof here will mention some of the applications. They cut across both civilian and defense applications. So whether that will be used, if defense or the military or the security apparatus see a need for it, that can be used as well. Again, because the data will be available for all. There was a question also on space debris. As has been indicated, the Taifa 1 will be launched to about 500 kilometers and then take about 5 years. So the 5 years, because of atmospheric drag, then the altitude will keep on reducing. And then at the expiry of the 5 years, then we expect it to re-enter. So as it re-enters Earth, then it burns down. So it doesn't, because it's a small, it's not big. So it will burn down on re-entry, more or less like what happened to Icons. So we will not be polluting or introducing space debris into outer space. There was a question on limitations on human capacity and infrastructure. Part of why we're having these conversations is to try and see how we can catalyze more in terms of interventions. And I'm glad that the chair of NRF is seated between our board members. I hope there are conversations that are happening in terms of how we can access more funding to the sector, because again, like I indicated earlier, we need to, and the panelists indicated, we need to put infrastructure. It is not only government that needs to do that, where we can get support from the private sector. I see my colleague here from Esri, where they're able to come in and support. We'll be happy to do that, because like Esri provides softwares that are used for geospatial analysis. Where they are able to provide that within our ecosystem, we would really appreciate located it because of the capability that they do have. And again, we're looking at the universities to develop capacity, and that is why we have been extending the research grants to the universities to try and see whether you can help us in that element as well. Again, also it should be more of a collective activity. On the element of telemedicine, much of what we'll be able to get from the satellite is more of imagery, multispectral imagery. So it's not a communication satellite. Hopefully we'll get there in due time. So in terms of telemedicine, we'll not be able to do that. But are we able to monitor disease outbreak using imagery? Yes, we can do that, like monitoring the conditions that are usually prime for, say, mosquitoes to breed. That was an example that was given that we can use for in the analysis, but not directly in terms of telecommunication. Hopefully we'll get there at some point. On why we are not launching from Malindi, the spaceport has not been used. The last launch was done in 1988. So it is not in that state where it's reusable. But that is a conversation that we're having in terms of how we can have that happen, whether it is at that particular site or in a different site, because these days there is a possibility of even launching it. As long as you have a platform, you can launch it from a container, and we are trying to explore all those opportunities and possibilities from the sector. I want to give Professor Karanja to share about the application dimension.
Okay, thank you, Charles. I think I still pursue the line of applications in medicine. The question with regard to whether one can use this kind of a satellite to get to know health infrastructure, maybe monitor certain diseases, or even monitoring access to water facilities. And the answer to that is yes, because this is an Earth observation satellite, so it is able to map this infrastructure. If there are health facilities, you can actually be able to map them. Water facilities, you can be able to map them. And from there, you can do now an in-depth analysis to establish whether, for instance, whether those health facilities are adequate or not, whether the access to the water points are adequate or not, and even whether the water itself, in terms of quality, is good enough for human consumption. So being another observation satellite, it is going to help us in doing a lot of location-based, or providing us with location-based information. And of course, in addition to other data sets, now we can add value to that location information. Thank you.
Yeah, I think if I might add to Charles and professors, the question on the military, I think we can remind ourselves, even the internet was pioneered by the military before it was made available to the public. The Director General announced, and the PS actually, of Defense announced that the Space Agency put in a catalyst fund to help Kenyans, to challenge our Kenyan engineers to build a homemade satellite. So I think that is the role of government, whether it's the Ministry of Defense or not. At least they prioritized it enough to get us started, so that they can demonstrate, the opportunities for private sector and other ministries to also do the same. I hope you're well answered. And of course, even as you're monitoring human diseases, I think even animal diseases is very useful to be able to map out things like migration patterns, etc., which are all informative. So they might not be at the end user part of telemedicine, but I think it's a starting point. Okay, let's move on to the other questions, Vivian.
Okay, so I think my question was still linked to the telemedicine and the applications in health. First and foremost, I think the realization that Earth observation, let me start. There are 4 space segments, right? So you have Earth observation, you have positioning and navigation, you have SATCOM, satellite communication, and then you have astronomy and space science. And all these segments have different satellites. So Taifa 1 is an Earth observation satellite, just one segment of all the 4 space segments that are available. And very specifically, telemedicine as an application would be very reliant on the communication satellites, because you're using internet technologies and other integrated ICT services to deliver, maybe for instance, a surgery in a remote area in Wajir, for instance, via some tools or devices that can be set up, and you have maybe a surgeon in the US and they're conducting the specific medical surgery on a patient with the guidance of the external party. To do that, then it means you require the communication technologies much more. The positioning communication technologies, a very good example of that in this day and age, relates to even the ones that are able to help us watch, say, a football game. Manchester United playing live, and we're able to catch that. The positioning and navigational satellites relate to what we commonly know as GPS. And GPS is part of just the global navigation satellite systems. Now, that navigational aspect in the GPS is what enables us be able to move from one point to another via various applications, such as those commonly known to us, such as Uber. Now, when we come to the Earth observation space, this is a satellite that first and foremost is Earth observing. So it's launched up and it looks downwards, observing what is happening on Earth. And with that regard, very specifically to your applications you will have or try to pull, I think we asked some of the rhetoric questions, but I believe they are very significant in this case, because they would spur that thinking towards innovation that, for instance, for a student like you, you're looking into. There's commonly talk of these One Health programs, One Health dimensions that are now coming into place. And under the One Health framework globally, you are looking at defining or understanding what affects animals, and understanding that whatever affects the environment would in turn affect animals and in turn also affect humans. So in that whole ecosystem, then you ensure that monitoring of the environment, for instance, in this case, via our Earth observation satellite, would be able to give us some of the indicators that speak to the status or the condition of our environment with regards to pollution, name it all. And right now, as we speak, we even have satellites that are probably just monitoring air pollution in these regards. There's very many applications within the space of One Health, and it's an upcoming domain that as industry, we really need to look at, and as students, you really need to start looking into those kind of solutions to be able to, innovate around that. Innovating in the sense that you can be able to start thinking about some of the diseases that affect us, for instance. What explain the reason behind why cancer is very high in specific areas, say around Machakos? What explains that? Is it something that is environmentally castigated? Is there any linkage to what is happening with our environment so that we can be able to use this data to predict or to analyze the relationship or create that linkage, a relationship between our environment and the diseases that are affecting people? What explains some propagation of respiratory diseases in specific areas such as industrial area or around Kisumu? What explains why, for instance, and then, this is arguably, scientists can argue about this, what really pushes or, what explains the occurrence of certain diseases such as Parkinson's, such as sickle cell, very highly in around the Nyanza regions in this country? Is it genetics? Is there something environmentally related? So there's a lot of research gaps that we actually do have. And as we speak, those are some of the areas as industry we're looking to get into in order to be able to provide research and innovations that will very, provide early warning in cases of disease propagation or disease, understanding. And there's very many examples that we have used even at company level. For instance, we've been able to support via use of this technology to support snake bite or vector-borne disease propagation mapping to understand prevalence and to link it to, some of the health facility data that you have in the country. So in a nutshell, I think there is a lot of opportunity for you there as students, especially in that health informatics space. And there's a gap that particularly even from some of those rhetoric questions, is really going to feed into the clarity that we need. Ideally, most of the innovations that we've seen in this earth, or at least globally, have come from the very many questions we keep asking ourselves randomly. Why does this happen this way? And really, from even the Esri perspective of the science of where, we're really selling the science of where, of what, of when, and of why. And really, I think I will leave it at that.
I think that's a very comprehensive answer. Esri, do you have something to conclude? Any question that you feel like you wanted to add? Cliff?
Well, guys have responded to them greatly, and where they're elders and professors, things can only be right. And so I think I'm just excited that some students sat down and prepared to come and ask questions. I think that's an exciting thing. And because they couldn't come, then they sent one of them go speak on our behalf. I think that's my excitement that this event really has a lot of impact, and the expectation was really great. And I'm also excited that the different areas that students are already thinking about of the applications of the space technology, and more so the data that now we are talking about, the Earth observation. So, well, while the data is to be provided or is provided, now what remains, and the technology is also available, as Charles was alluding, that the technologies to process these data is already available. We are doing a lot of research in building our ArcGIS technology to enable the processing of the data, including machine learning, deep learning, AIs, and many other things, and even incorporating the IoT tools or sensors into it, that you are able to do a lot. Now, once the data is there, the technology is there, then the next thing is, who is there to play around, to use it? And that really offers a great opportunity when I'm seeing the questions that are being asked, that all those, actually the answer is yes, but you have to do something on them. You have to take advantage of what is available to make sense out of it. Capacity development, capacity building, human capacity, and many other things. I also believe that over and above training that we get from the universities, and I believe, hoping and assuming that our institutions of learning are up to date with the current technological trends. And if not, then of course there's another area that needs a lot of attention, because things are just moving super fast. Newer technologies, newer problems to be solved. And that requires a lot of dynamism in terms of how we catch up or how we adapt to filling the gaps. And so that I believe Professor and the academic fraternity are handling well. And so due to the internet and also the cloud, there are a lot of also learning resources that are there. I think I want to mention that you really do not need a formal learning environment to start learning. There are a lot of virtual classes, a lot of free online courses, including YouTube and many others. They're all there that you could get. How to do flood prediction. I believe if you write that even now, you'll get several tutorials that could help you. So if you have the data, you have the technology, then you have the how. You don't really need a formal class. I mean, I'm not running down formal classes. I'm just saying in addition to that, or if it delays, or if there is a gap, we should not sit and wait that, well, that was not in our curriculum, or we were not taught that, so we can't do it. That's why you are enabled and given powers to read and research more. And I believe in that process also our researchers should be out there to looking at these unconventional ways and conventional applications of technologies to bridge the gap. We are going to face new problems every day. We are seeing them, but we have to solve them. There must be a solution, and we have to provide that solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the second panel today. I would like to now invite Colonel Nyawade to formally acknowledge the board and take us through the next part of this program. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, our panelists.
Thank you very much for your attention and patience. It's really been a wonderful day for us, despite the delay in the launch of the Taifa 1 satellite. This has been due to wind conditions that were not favorable for the launch, and it has been delayed not earlier than tomorrow, 9:44 a.m. So that means could be tomorrow, could be, depending on weather conditions, could be later. So we still plan for that. We'll still be here tomorrow to witness the launch from California. If it will happen, we'll still be here and we'll have a panel for that. So those who will have time, please join us. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to recognize our board members who are here. I'd not ask them to stand, but I'll just mention them by name. Dr. Doris Muta, Engineer Vincent Adul, Dr. David Otoma, and Engineer Dr. Gakuru Mushemi. Thank you very much. And from the National Treasury, Ms. Winnie Molonko. Thank you very much, our board members. And last but not least, to the program, we'd like to request one of our board members, Dr. David Otoma, to give us a vote of thanks. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My task is very simple, to give a vote of thanks during the public event to witness a launch of Taifa 1 set at the University of Nairobi in Taifa Hall, much as it has been delayed by hopefully a day. So the first thanks goes to the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, University of Nairobi, Professor Julius Ogengo, for giving us a welcoming remarks. The Ministry of Defense representative, led by the Principal Defense Forces Technical College, Brigadier Mohammed Ali. Of course, the Kenya Space Agency board members, my fellow directors, who the Lieutenant Colonel has named. So one most valuable invited guests, that is, ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to have been asked to give a vote of thanks on this occasion. So on behalf of the Kenya Space Agency Board of Directors and Management, and on my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our main speakers for gracing our occasion and sharing words of wisdom, our appreciation to the panelists for honoring our invitation and sharing their knowledge and experience in this new frontier of space science, technology, and applications, and to all guests for finding it worthwhile to share this moment with us. Indeed, as Kenyans, this is a moment of national pride and national unity as we celebrate the launch of Taifa 1 satellite. This 2-year project has now come to fruition, and we must appreciate the effort of the team that made this possible with support from our government. I also extend my thanks to the University of Nairobi for their enormous support and cooperation in the organization of this event. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks with dedication. We most sincerely also wish to thank the teams responsible for the technical arrangement, stage setting, and catering, and the media houses. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to state that we are all most grateful to you. We thank you for being with us this morning as we go to our various destinations. Let us remember that today we are not only celebrating a single event, but the beginning of a great journey with high expectations. It has been a great pleasure. As I conclude, I would like to share a quote by Robert Hutchings Goddard. He was an American engineer, a professor, a physicist like myself, and an inventor who is credited with creating and building the world's first liquid-fueled rocket, and he lived before my own father was born. That was between 1882 and 1945. It is difficult, that is now his quote, it is difficult to say what is impossible. For the dream of yesterday is the hope of today and the reality of tomorrow, end quote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Otoma, for that wonderful speech. And just tell your neighbor, we are just getting started. This is not the end of it. Taifa 1, by the way, there's a reason why it's Taifa 1 and not Taifa 10. So how many do you think we want to launch? Endless possibilities. Yes, so we've come to the end of today's event, and as you've been told, we'll be here same time tomorrow, hoping that the space weather that Professor Baki has talked about will be easy on us, and we'll be able to have our satellite, launch into orbit. So right now we have the University of Nairobi with KSA has prepared some tea / lunch. We're going to have our ushers directors outside. For our stakeholders, we're going to have our tea in the Vice Chancellor's parlor. He allowed us to have that. And then for the students, you're going to have your tea at the first floor mess. So let's go and continue the conversation and network as we wait for tomorrow. So if you're available tomorrow, hope to see you here. The setup is going to remain like this, and then of course let just come and we rejoice together. Let me see. We can have closing word of prayer from a volunteer who's been touched by the Holy Spirit. We pray for the weather tomorrow and also pray for our tea. So somebody that has been inspired, you've been touched.
The Kenya Space Agency is set to launch its second nano-satellite christened Taifa 1 in April this year in California, United States of America. Taifa 1 satellite is an Earth observation satellite with a payload designed to provide multispectral imagery of Kenya that will be useful for environmental monitoring, natural resources management, agriculture, disaster risk mitigation and security, among others. The satellite will be a game changer in enhancing Kenya's access to real-time data that is crucial in socio-economic development spheres such as urban planning, agriculture, reforestation, climate change, telemedicine, among others. Obtaining reliable and cost-effective data is critical in addressing societal changes effectively. Therefore, satellite data can be used by the government to improve its ways of predicting calamities, detecting security threats, managing natural resources, and regulating urbanization.
For satellite communications, or generally having data from an asset in space, you need to have a ground receiver station that you will use to download the data or will be in communication with the satellite. It will be tracking that satellite so that every time it is overhead Kenya, remember this is a satellite that is going around the Earth, and every time it is overhead Kenya, that is the time our ground receiver station is going to download, is going to establish a link with the satellite and download the data. These are imagery data. So as now to see how that is connected to the farmer. So if, for example, you use that satellite imagery to characterize the condition of crops, for example, you are able to say that this is land that is under maize. And because that satellite will be going over Kenya every time, so there will be a series of those imageries which with the right kind of hardware on the ground receiver station, you are able to look at the progression of, for example, that farm, okay, and see the condition of that crop.
Due to the miniaturization of electronics and components, satellite technology has become cheaper and more accessible, resulting in nanosatellites having more capabilities while being affordable.
The fact that it is affordable means that it is something that we can do without taking too much resources from those critical areas like health, food security, water management, because big satellites would cost a lot of money. So nanosatellites is the way to go, and I think in future where we are going is to have a constellation of them.
The satellite is set to spur Kenya's role not just as a consumer of space data, but also an active player in the quest to strengthen the space agenda. In the development of Taifa 1 nanosatellite, a team of Kenyan engineers, both electrical and mechanical, were identified to implement the project. They underwent a customized training on the space environment, orbital mechanics, and design of space systems to be able to understand and design a mission that would survive the extreme space environment.
The Human Resource Department and the Kenya Space Agency sourced and engaged electrical engineers, mechanical engineers who were trained to develop the Taifa 1 satellite.
We have had a long journey coming up to this point, and I'm also happy to present that apart from this development, we have also been able to do additional hardware. This board that I have with me here today is the Sayari Labs payload processor, which we designed internally fully at this facility, and is currently has gone to space. So it is a radio module that we believe that once successfully tested in space will be able to support our future missions.
In my role as a team lead, I was responsible in coordinating between our team that is developing the subsystems here in Kenya and also our partners outside. In the coordination, we were doing a lot of communication as well as ensuring that all the subsystems are on the same page. Another component is that we were doing reports where we were able to document all the subsystems to make sure that everything is well documented and can be followed by any team member within the team.
Taifa 1 is a 3U satellite. When you talk about 3U, we say it is in a class of nanosatellites. We have other satellites which are bigger, but for this case it is a nanosatellite, and its dimensions are 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 30 centimeter. So when you talk about the structures, we are talking about the frame that houses all other subsystems of the satellite. The structure is something like this. So it houses all other subsystems, and the other subsystems include the onboard computer, the communication subsystem, the electric power subsystem. There is the attitude determination and control subsystem, and then there is the payload.
After the launch, our role as electrical engineers will be to operate the satellite and also to monitor the performance of the satellite, making sure that every parameter that was set and every functionality that the satellite is supposed to perform performs well, and also monitoring the health checks of the satellite.
So what I'm in charge of with the Taifa 1 mission is the ground receiving station and applications. What generally happens at the ground applications and receiving station is where we receive the commands or the requests from the stakeholders on the type of data they want, the type of location where they want, and that is where the missions operations also take place.
The space sector has a wide array of stakeholders. There is government, who are key stakeholders, because essentially most of the applications, we are not usually the end users. We develop systems which are supposed to inform decisions in other regions.
Increasingly, government are making decisions based on data on various issues. The best platform and instrument to collect data is satellite. Data on agriculture, data on minerals, data on energy, data on our forest cover, data on urbanization. So the best instrument to capture data now, in the age we are in, is satellite.
For Earth observation alone, I can say there's virtually a host of users who utilize data from Earth observation.
Here at ICPAC, one of the things that we are doing specifically in the IGA Disaster Operations Center is building early warning applications, which we believe will be able to help our member states act early before the disaster hits. One of the key components of early warning systems is Earth observation data, and that is where Kenya Space Agency comes in. We use a lot of Earth observation data from different satellites at the moment to be able to build applications that can be used to inform decisions and policies as well. We're really looking forward to integrating the data from Taifa 1 into the systems that we're developing here at ICPAC.
Locate IT, or what sometimes people refer to as Locate It, is a geo-ICT company based here in Nairobi, Kenya. So Locate It and Kenya Space Agency have been partnering over the last couple of years on very specifically a project we call Agricultures, which is use of remote sensing technologies to enhance agricultural productivity in Africa. And this presents an opportunity for us to continue developing applications that will serve and address our societal needs.
My name is Kenneth Chepkwony. I'm a program manager at Tomorrow Now, which is a non-profit that works to bridge the gap between next generation weather and climate solutions and communities that need them most. We do this by leveraging philanthropic capital as well as innovative partnerships with organizations including Kenya Space Agency, who've been a key stakeholder that we've been keen to work with. So Tomorrow Now is currently working on an MOU with the Kenya Space Agency, and the idea will be to leverage some of the quality data that the Kenya Space Agency is looking to generate and what they already have.
Yes, so Akiba Mashinani Trust supports a group of people living in informal settlements known as Muungano wa Wanavijiji, who have come together to advocate for the rights of the people that are living in the informal settlements. So the launch of this new satellite, I believe it's going to make the work that Akiba Mashinani Trust does more easier, in that we'll be able to get a clearer imagery. So what we do in most cases is that we get images from satellite imageries, we digitize them to come up with shape files. And one of the challenges that we get is that some of these images are not very clear. So we are hoping that these images from this new satellite are going to be clearer, and that will make our mapping exercise very simple.
The DRSS stands for Directorate of Resource Survey and Remote Sensing. The relationship between DRSS and the Kenya Space Agency has been there for quite a long time, since the inception. And this is due to the fact that actually both institutions are applying remote sensing technology in implementation of their core mandate. So there's the issue of application of satellite data in undertaking most of the programs that address socio-economical issues in Kenya. So these two institutions have been in collaboration for quite a long time. In fact, we also have a memorandum of understanding between the two institutions that affirms the strong relationship between these two agencies.
Kenya's historic launch of the Taifa 1 nanosatellite will be incomplete without a brief look into history. Kenya's forays into space dates back to 1964, when the San Marco Equatorial Range, now known as the Luigi Broglio Malindi Space Center, was established. As a result of the strides, the first satellite, San Marco 2, was launched into orbit from the Malindi-based station on 26 April 1967. Thereafter, the Kenyan space industry has grown in leaps and bounds, totaling 9 satellites and 15 sounding rockets launched in a span of 2 decades from 1967 and 1988 from Malindi, Kenya.
Space technology is critical. It's critical for the military, it's critical for government in improving the socio-economic aspects of its people. Kenya is on the equator, and Kenya being in the equator, then it is a very, very important position globally to collect data from the space.
To manage all space-related activities in the country, the National Space Secretariat was established in 2009, which later transitioned into the Kenya Space